All right, everybody, we are here for one of our sequence of budget preparation meetings, work sessions here on Wednesday, the 3rd of June, 2020. In a normal environment, we would have approved the budget yesterday, but given that we wanted to spend a little more time preparing, certainly pivoting given the crisis period that we're all living through, and I think that we're going to come through stronger after. We needed a little more time, so the current intent is to have the budget in front of the mayor and commission for a vote on the 16th of June. And so we have tonight set up, and we have an additional opportunity next week should we need another meeting next week. I know there were several questions that came last week. Management provided some responses. I know commissioners have been coalescing around a set of priorities. I think many of which, at least given the prior conversation and communication I've had with many of you since, are great priorities. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Russell Edwards, so he can carry us through the, I think, hopefully the final preparation of the budget. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, do you want to have your special call session for the going to executive session first? That was how it was advertised.
That is, it will be afterwards, ma'am. We'll go ahead and do budget now, and so.
We need a motion.
Okay, you don't want to call the roll of vote now then? Okay, that's fine.
We can go ahead and do that. We can call roll. Yes, ma'am. We'll go right ahead.
Okay, Davenport,
Here.
Parker,
Here.
Fink,
Here.
Wright, Denson,
Here.
Naismith,
Present.
Edwards,
Here.
Harrod,
Present.
Thornton,
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
Okay. We have a quorum.
All right, great. So I'm thinking how we might want to proceed with this meeting with an agenda here. And I'm thinking we could, what do y'all think? First, we could how about this? We could hear, we sort of have two proposals on the table that have been brought forward. One budget proposal from Commissioners Parker and Denson that's has information associated with, and then we have an alternative proposal that came out this morning from Commissioners Hamby, Wright, Thornton, Davenport, and Harrod. So how does it sound if we give, say, some time for each grouping to make their case and answer questions? And then once that's concluded, we could go over the answers that were provided by management. And then we can finish up with final input. How does that sound to everybody?
Sounds good.
I guess alternatively, we could go over the answers.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
Okay, I guess alternatively, we could go over the answers management provided and then go into the Parker Denson provisions and then go into the Hamby Wright provisions. Does anybody have a preference either way?
That sounds good to me.
I think it'd be helpful to get the answers from the manager before we go into more discussion. Yeah.
Okay, is that fine with everybody? All right, unanimous consent. Let's go ahead and Manager Williams, would you like to, sorry to put you on the spot, but just maybe make an overview of some of the answers and issues that you've responded to and that you provided to us to the questions from the last meeting? and then we could all take in turn some further clarifying questions. How's that sound?
Sounds good, Commissioner. So there are a number of questions that you had, and we've tried to respond to those. I know Attorney Drake is on the phone and did provide some research into the supplements, and I'm going to give him a minute since I'm maybe surprising him. Allow him maybe answer a couple other questions, and we can come back to that.
Well, Manager Williams, would you like to highlight a document that perhaps you've sent to us and through email that maybe we can pull up?
Sure. Absolutely. This was a document that was sent last night at 7:35 p.m. and it's titled "Follow-up Budget Session Answers."
Okay.
And attached to that were two documents. One was the 11-page responses to your questions from the May 28th budget session, and then also a copy of the FY18 Jail Inmate Healthcare Services Agreement.
Great.
I sent one about an hour later. Commissioner Wright had asked a follow-up question in the wake of the last budget session regarding just learning more about insurance pools when it comes to healthcare and the different options there. And we had our consultant respond on that. So those were the two emails that comprised the responses to your questions from last week.
Okay, great. Has everybody found that document? I'm looking.
I'm loading it now. I had only
found it. The first answer deals with the desire of the commission to eliminate the local supplement paid to the district attorney's salary. The district attorney that's going to be, of course, whenever that position is appointed by the governor, that will now be an appointed position, and that office will be held by that appointment until 2022. And so there seemed to be a pretty a push among commissioners to remove that local supplement until that election is restored and that we elect actually our district attorney. So from what I see in this answer, I think it looks clear to me that we'd be fine by eliminating that supplement. I don't know if Attorney Drake's on the line yet. I know he worked on some of that question for Commissioner Wright. But is it still?
Yeah, I'm here, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Russell, can you tell me quite quickly what time that one was sent by Blaine?
7:35
this morning.
Oh, last night.
Oh, last night. Okay, thank you. Commissioner.
Go ahead.
Well, we could not find where that local supplement was set by local legislation. Where that supplement was set by local legislation. We actually could not find. The clerk was able to locate a resolution. Everything it appears like it may have been done or an intergovernmental agreement with Oconee County. It appears it was done as part of adoption of the budget in past years.
Okay.
It's a recent amendment coming last year, so we can't find anything that prohibit removing the supplement.
Okay. So
the manager had a recommendation.
Well, and what I think Commissioner Edwards clarified it with his opening statement about what the intent was. So I think he's clarified that.
Okay.
Okay. Any other input on eliminating that local supplement to, free up some funds for other programming? Is that okay?
Well, are we going to be eliminating the supplement for the entire department or just for the...
Just the salary of the appointed person.
Okay.
Yeah. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just want to strongly agree that I believe that supplement should be removed.
Okay.
If we're not allowed to elect our own DA, then we shouldn't have to supplement their salary.
All right.
Those funds could be better spent, possibly the public defender's office.
Okay. Sounds good. So
Russell, call on Tim.
Okay. Sorry, y'all. Hey, I don't see the hands. So y'all, if you could shoot me a text, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Wait, go like this.
That's what I'll do. Okay, yeah, I think I'm just trying to get clarification, similar to what Commissioner Neesmith is saying, because I'm seeing the supplement for acting DA, but then also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 supplements for assistant DAs. Are we talking about removing all 6 of those, or just the one for the acting DA of the 13,000?
Well, I believe, well, that's on the table. I would, I believe originally I was thinking we would just take away the supplement for the DA, the appointed person, when that person is appointed. Open for discussion.
I guess I would, I think maybe it doesn't have to be a black or white decision. There could be a gray decision here. I definitely agree with going ahead and removing the $13,000 until, like you said, the actual control of that office back to the county voters, but potentially also just to help equitable transition between prosecutors and defenders, which is already a pretty high disparity. We could lower those 9,000s to say 7,000, and then completely eliminate the 13,000.
Okay.
Be open to that.
Commissioner Link, what'd you say?
I would be open to that.
Okay.
And what, if you could do the quick math for me, what cost impact is that?
That would be $23,006.40.
Okay.
Could y'all repeat what you're thinking again? I missed.
Reducing the assistant DA's local supplement each $2,000, as well as eliminating entirely the local supplement for the appointed DA.
I will make sure. I know we tried to look at as many positions as we could. I'll have my staff make sure that there's any local legislation about assistant DAs, but I think they would have found it.
Okay.
But we'll check on that and make absolutely sure.
Okay.
And the other thing is that there's no IGA that's with us in Oconee County. We couldn't find that. But I will ask the clerk again if there's anything with assistant DAs.
Okay. Great. All right. The next question.
Rise, raising your hand.
Sorry, go ahead.
Melissa, were you raising your hand first?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll go after you.
There were 2, I believe, at least one, if not 2 questions in here that I had that didn't. Perhaps earlier today, the manager sent out a response following this document that I didn't receive. But the first question I had was related to the $40,000 budgeted for downtown cameras, and I asked what that line item was for, and I don't know if I received a response yet. I was wondering if we could get information on that, or if we're still waiting.
Yes, and I'm sorry, with everything that's going on, I've not got that answer back. Ironically, I was going through these just now, saw that, just was texting the chief on that. If you'll hold that to the end, we'll get you an answer.
Okay, thank you. And then I think earlier today, I asked a question, and just, if we don't have it right now, that's fine, regarding the vehicle replacement program, to see if there were any potential savings by pushing that back a year or 2, like just keeping some of our vehicles in rotation for an additional year, and instead of replacing them on the current timeline.
Okay, and Commissioner, you had sent those questions this morning, and I have subsequently, I sent you an initial reply just less than an hour ago.
I'm so sorry if I haven't seen that yet. I just wanted
No. I just telling this for everybody else so they understand. And then subsequently got a reply from Andrew Saunders with some additional clarification, Commissioner. And so just for the benefit of everybody, basically in fiscal year 05 and 11, there was a holiday, if you will, or a decrease in the amount of contributions. What we try to accomplish with our fleet replacement program is where every year funds are paid into a pool so that cars and vehicles, trucks, heavy equipment can be bought when they're needed, and you don't have a lot of spikes in the capital budget request because you got to replace equipment, or you're able to replace equipment when it needs to be replaced. We do a lot of our own maintenance, and sometimes vehicles get to the point of diminishing returns where the cost to keep them running is just not worth it.
Okay.
So having said that, a few years when this all came out, when I understood this, when I became manager, and that there were discounts and we were underfunded, the central service director at the time tasked him with going in there and trying to figure it all out. And there was and I'm going in some detail here, Commissioner, I'm sorry, but I think it's important because I think the fleet is a pivotal issue tonight, and so I want everybody to have the correct context. So what we understood, that fleet was underfunded. And for the people that are listening, this would be like if you bought a car, a brand new car, that you would do what we're all supposed to do, and that you would actually put money in your savings account, the week after you got your car and saved up, so that when you needed a new car, you could buy a new one with what you had saved. And we actually do that as a government, which I think is pretty neat. When we understood that, there were mileage targets for certain types of cars and hour targets for certain types of heavy equipment. And we did a number of things at the time. We came up with this 5-year plan to get us back to be fully funded. At the same time, we changed the way that the thresholds for the replacement of the cars, and we took the opportunity to change it to something that was more understandable by the department directors, because 100,000 miles on an administrative sedan is very different than 100,000 miles on a patrol car. They're just different. And so we have a 15-year target life cycle for the non-public safety vehicles. If you were to extend non-public safety vehicles, the reason that, again, a patrol car is driven more constantly. When we've gone to take-home cars, we hope that we can extend their lives, but they are set at an 8-year life cycle, and the rest of the non-public safety vehicles are set at a 15-year. You could save about $300,000 a year if you went to a 17-year target life cycle. And the question that Commissioner Parker had asked is, what if we drove them an extra 1 or 2 years? The answer I gave to her still stands, is, the time that a car hits 15 years, it's not like a birthday and the department director drives it over and says, we need a new car. It's really, we've got some cars that we've had in our fleet for years past their useful life because they were just good cars. And conversely, we've got cars that we bought that never reached their 15th birthday because they're lemons and they don't run well, and we just have to swap them out. So having said that, Commissioner, that's the answer to your we carry some fund balance in the program because we've yet to replace cars that have aged out, but they're still running well. And that if you wanted to extend those lives further for the non-public safety administrative vehicles, you could save $300,000.
Okay.
Just as and I know, I'm sorry, and I'll stop here. Other things like our fire trucks, our pumper trucks, they go for 22 years. I would not recommend extending those any further. So things like that. There are some that we could live a little bit longer with, some others maybe not. Okay. I'll stop there.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much. And then another question I know that you expressed at the last meeting that it was not a preferred route for the chief, but if we were to replace some authorized positions in the police department with a new mental health co-responder unit, how many vacancies would need to be replaced in order to neutralize budget impact? And I'm not sure if I got a response on that either.
Well, and the answer and the chief is on the line if he would like to respond. But those vacancies, and it's been tough to recruit and retain officers, and it's very much a pay issue. And we all know that policing is in a crisis right now. It's a challenging work. But all of those, what I think is missing from the conversation is that there's a lot of those officer vacancies that we hope to fill, and they would serve important roles that they're not currently serving because they are vacant, which causes the chief to have to reorganize some of the things that we're doing to keep the community safe. I don't think anybody would argue with having an additional, mental health responder team. And if you did choose to use an existing officer position, we would just ask that you would consider reinstating that position next year.
So what are those numbers?
I
don't know if the chief wanted to go ahead and speak. I don't know if he started to say something.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can get you the exact numbers, the exact dollar figure. First off, good evening, everyone, and I can get you the exact dollar figures, but it would essentially be the cost of one police officer, and then some additional funds to cover a vehicle and the other equipment that would go along with that.
The manager had previously said $175,000. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, well, that does, but I think that includes the funding for the Advantage counselor as well.
That's right.
The second piece, yes.
So it's $130,000 for both personnel, one officer, one Advantage person, and then there's $40,000 of one-time capital cost of outfitting them, is my understanding.
Okay, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I believe these figures are correct. It's $130,000 to pay both the officer salary and benefits and the social worker, the mental health, not a civilian, to be a part of the team. Roughly $130,000, and then there's another $45,000 that to buy the vehicle and other appropriate equipment that they need.
Okay, and for the personnel and salary and benefits, again, you maybe answered this question earlier today and I didn't see it, and if so, I'm really sorry. If we were to bring those folks on in the second quarter of FY21, how much would that be?
Yes. Let me get that. Yes, so if you were to bring them for 9 months of the year, now let me back out that $30,000 for the vehicle purchase and just talk to you just personnel and operating. So and now I've got those figures. A full year is $145,000.
For 9 months and operating.
Personnel and operating. So it's but not the vehicle purchase. Sorry to be confusing. If you were only funded for 9 months, it would be $111,000, and if you were to fund it for 6 months, it would be $77,000. And of course, this is true of any initiative that you wait to fund later in the budget year. That full annual cost will come due with the next ensuing budget year.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Chief, did you have other things you wanted to say?
I don't know whether you received the answer on the camera question that you asked earlier.
I did not.
That is a continuation of our camera program. $27,000 of that is for the Georgia Power camera program with license plate readers. $12,300 is Georgia Power wireless camera. $10,000 is for the phase camera replacement of the cameras, and then $2,600 is just a project margin. So those are the specific numbers for those camera programs.
So those figures for like Georgia Power and for the wireless cameras, that's just the fee you pay, like I'm assuming on a monthly basis, to Georgia Power for those.
On the cameras to Georgia Power on the cameras, yes.
Okay, and then so for the phase camera replacement, could you talk to us a little bit about that? What's the life cycle of these cameras? How often do they need to be replaced?
I don't have the exact life cycle of the cameras. Let me get that out. Let me see if I can grab a quick answer for you.
Okay. And if anyone else has other questions while we wait, I'm willing to.
Go ahead, Commissioner Lane.
Yeah. While we were speaking about vehicles and police, I had a lot of outreach from constituents about whatever happened to our bike cops. Folks downtown were particularly concerned, during shutdown that their businesses were not getting monitored. And also I've had outreach from folks in neighborhoods who feel like it would be much more effective if they had patrols on bike.
Well, while the chief can speak to this as well, Commissioner Link, but I'm going to tell you my understanding. It's just the number of vacancies that we have. We've had to prioritize and fill, certain operations that the police perform that are must-haves. And certainly I agree with you and many of our residents that the bike police are an effective means of policing. But I think those positions had to be used to fill, some of the essential work.
So, may I?
Yes, sir.
5 to 7 years is the life cycle for the downtown cameras. And as far as the bicycle patrols, you're right on point, Manager, in that our resources, we are barely able to maintain minimum staffing to cover the beats so that we can deliver services to all of the communities. So when we have enough resources or additional resources, we will utilize them. And our downtown unit does utilize the bicycles, when they are down there periodically.
Okay, we had questions regarding. Let's try to keep organized and moving down these answers that the manager provided, and then once we get through that, we'll move to the next phase. But we've got input from Commissioner Davenport, and then Commissioner Neesmith, and then Commissioner Harrod.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going back to the DA situation. And I just wanted to clarify to make sure that I just want to say that, I just think it's a bad idea, and I get, I get the sentiment from our community, but I hate to play politics with our budget, and I hate the fact that our governor did what he did. But for our assistant DAs, for them to have to bear the brunt, or whoever gets appointed to that position to have to bear that brunt, I just think it's callous on our part for us to do that.
Okay. Commissioner Smith, then Commissioner Harrod, then Commissioner Denson.
Mr. Manager, I had asked early on about the possibility of delaying the computer replacement for a year. Have you thought about that anymore?
Yes, sir. Give me 1 second here.
Okay, while he's looking, Commissioner Harrod.
Thanks. I was actually, what Commissioner Davenport said, I was going to agree with. I understand the anger at the governor for what he's done, or rather what he has not done. But I think punishing the employees in the district attorney's office and the interim district attorney, I think we're focusing on the wrong people. They didn't ask for this, and I really don't think that's right. I do think that we need to increase the salaries of our public defender's office, as we need good attorneys, and we need to remunerate them properly. But I think the previous discussion, I don't think is the right way to go about it. And I did have a question. If we were to take away the supplement from the DA, but to leave it for the ADAs, what would that end up? Would that mean that the DA is actually earning less than the ADAs? Can anybody answer that question?
We'll look at wage compression. We can check that out. Okay. We'll try to find that. Commissioner Denson?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I just want to clarify, I do think that the reduction on actual DA or the acting DA, I think that's merited because the idea of the local supplement, taking local control away from us, I think in that position, it makes sense for us to remove that supplement until the actual electoral control is given back to the local people. On the assistant DAs, and I hear you, and my idea there is not playing politics. My idea there is that of trying to find a more equitable way to attack this disparity between the prosecutors and the public defenders, which right now is very great. And I think right now, I mean, this is a supplement that we're giving extra, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff or anybody, but from what I can see, we give no supplement to the public defenders, yet we give the supplement to the prosecutors. So my idea is just simply to lessen that down to $7,000, not as a punishment to them because of some kind of political thing, but because we have a great disparity here, and I would like to see us increase somewhat the public defenders, and then lower that additional supplement to try to attack that disparity.
Great.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, sir.
I did want to say that Mr. Petty, Michael Petty did this research regarding not just the DA supplements, but a number of them, if you read the memo, as I was requested. But I would like the chance, like I said, to verify. I think I said this already. To verify for the assistant DAs.
Sure.
The tutorial that he missed. So if anybody hears this and says, I don't want to advise you wrong, so I'm going to delve further into it, and I'll send and clarify if there's anything that is statutory that would keep us from being able to adjust them. I'm not aware of it, but I don't think Michael looked at that specific issue.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay, let's look at answer number 4.
Commissioner Link is your hand, by the way.
Okay, 1 second. I'll call on you in a second, Commissioner Link. Let's try to keep moving down this document, though. Let's get through this thing. The next answer was for anybody has some input on Manager Williams' answer on the capital budget shifted to SPLOST and T-SPLOST. Any input there? Okay, seeing none.
And Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
If I might, I'm ready to answer Commissioner Neesmith's earlier question anytime.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, so there are a number of things that Commissioner Neesmith that the budget is proposing to do. Is not just replace PCs, although about a quarter of the funds would be for PC replacements. And one of the things that I think is different than your normal replacement cycle is that we really are trying to replace most of the PCs with laptops, and certainly with the pandemic, the more mobile workforce is something that we're focused on. Another 20% or so is for wireless upgrades and expansion. That's split between approximately 60% upgrade and 40% expansion. We were looking to migrate to Office 365, and that's what we're excited about there is collaborative tools, ease of use, enhanced features, so on and so forth. So the sun will be setting on the old Office suite in the coming years, and we wanted to go ahead and start that migration and begin to test that out. A couple of other things, a small amount of it's on backup solutions, and about 10% of it's on storage. And so it's split between a number of IT initiatives.
Great.
I'm just wondering if there's anything in there, Blaine, that you can delay. I understand everything you said there, and I didn't realize. Office 365 is important to get to, but can you delay it?
Well, and that's a great question, and really that goes to most everything that's on the table. There are certain things the mayor asked me to prioritize some of the new initiatives, and I think as we look at all this, y'all, as we try to parse between what can and can't be cut, I think the first thing that we prioritize for is things that are really required or needed to support existing services. And then any expansion of service is something that, again, in the old vernacular, what are the must-haves and what are the nice-to-haves? And I find myself torn between really gravitating some of the new things that we would like and that it would help us greatly. But to answer your question, at the end of the day, if we support our current services, then that's our first priority. So having said that, Commissioner, the Office 365 migration could wait. As we dig deeper into this, could we use the PCs for an extra year? Sure, we could. It's just I do want to contrast this too with on the technology side. The investments that we've made of late have really positioned us well and with this pandemic as well. So certainly there are some of these things that we can put off for a year, and that's true of a lot of the new initiatives as well.
So
I've got many other questions, but I'm going to bore everybody.
Okay, well, we're going to have more opportunities for input. So we're moving down this document of answers that have been posited by commissioners previously. We're on number 4. Can or has any of the capital budget be shifted to SPLOST and T-SPLOST? Manager Williams has answered that under number 4. And before he answered that previous question, does anybody have any input on that? Everybody okay? We can move on down. Okay. We've got number 5. What are the multi-year initiatives in play, like proposed landfill transition? Anybody have any follow-ups on that answer provided by manager?
I have a question about a multi-year initiative.
Go for it.
That I wonder if we could help use to fund those mental health co-responder team. I noticed that there's a replacement of conducted energy device units in the police department's budget. I guess a replacement of those taser devices. And it looks like it's a multi-year initiative that ultimately over the next 8 or so years amounts to $2.28 million, $228,000 a year for the next several years. I'm wondering if we could delay that. I mean, if I recall correctly, those units just became in practice by ACCPD like 5 years ago, maybe. It was my first year on the commission.
Well, they do have a life cycle to them, and what we're trying to do with these things, and the same is true of the body cameras and the storage that's required with it. We're trying to, not have a huge hit in any one given year, but space it out so that it was just a continual cycle through there. And I was actually here when the police department first acquired the tasers, and I had some real legit concerns about it. But I also know that it's a non-lethal means of force, and oftentimes compliance can be gained by just pulling it out. I believe that they're out of warranty this coming year, and so it's time to reinvest. But they are, again, a non-lethal use of force for the police.
So logic states that, the vast majority of officers never, ever have to deploy that taser. I mean, so how many of them even ever get used? Do they somehow rot even without use? I don't know what goes into these devices.
Well, and I'll defer to the chief here, but they do have a shelf life on them. I mean, there are different parts and pieces to them that allow them to conduct that energy when it's needed, and that's something that has to be replaced. Chief, do you want to expound on that?
Sure. I think the taser, you've got to look at it like the firearm, in that it's a piece of equipment that you rarely are going to need to use, but you need to have it when the time and circumstances require for it. Because if you don't, then you're going to be left with other higher level forced options, things like striking instruments, a baton, or even lethal force. So when we come upon incidents where a person has a knife, we want to make sure that we And that's the part of the strategy that I recently implemented when I talked about stopping, staging, and getting your game plan together before you go in. And if at all possible, if you got to disarm a person that's suffering through mental crisis, utilizing a taser first. So they're not needed very often, but when they're needed, they need to have those weapons because it is a lower level of force than some of the other things that you might see. And I would point out that this is also a combined package with body-worn camera, the body-worn camera program. So this is a joint endeavor with Axon.
Oh, so this includes cameras. So
there's another part to it which deals with the body-worn cameras and the tasers. It's a package deal where we get a reduced cost because we're doing it all under one contract.
So the kind of incentive to replace the tasers is the fact that the body cameras need to be replaced.
No. The tasers have a life cycle. And so the tasers are running out of, they're coming out of their life cycle this year. In fact, some of them have already come out. I think February was the first set of them, and they bought them in increments. So during the remainder or balance of this year, the rest of them will reach their life cycle and they don't have to be replaced, but they're not guaranteed, and you don't want to get into a situation and it malfunction. And if it breaks, we can't send it back and get it repaired because it's no longer under warranty.
How much do these things cost a piece?
Don't quote me on it. I think they're about $700 a piece, and I'll get you a good answer to that in a minute.
All right. Commissioner Neesmith, did you still have a question?
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to make a comment since I had the privilege of attending Advanced Crisis Intervention that the chief put together a few months ago. The taser is a very integral part of crisis intervention so that the officer can use a non-lethal force in those situations. The officer needs to be able to know that taser is going to work. If the officer's not sure that taser is going to work, he's probably going to pull out his weapon. So I think it's important not only that the tasers work, but the officer knows that he or she can rely on that device for their own safety and for the safety of whoever they're encountering. So I hope that we can keep that program in.
I don't have a huge problem with the program. I'm just wondering about the need to replace them in this budget cycle, and I have questions about the life cycle of a piece of equipment that doesn't necessarily get used by most officers.
All right, great.
If I may, we're going to end up having to replace them eventually, if not now, in the future. And what's happening now is we have the opportunity to get a reduced price because of that the collective agreement price. So I'll just leave it at that.
Great. Any other input on multi-year initiatives in play? Or no, I'm sorry, not. Okay, sorry. Still on number 4. Any more questions about capital budget shifting to SPLOST or T-SPLOST? Okay. Seeing none, let's move back, or let's go down. Let's get through this document. Number 5. What are the multi-year initiatives in play, like the proposed landfill transition? Any input on number 5's answer provided by management? Any follow-up or clarification needed? All right, seeing none, let's go down to number 6. What are the timelines for adoption of the state budget and the ACC budget? Any questions from folks on timeline? We kind of went over that in the beginning. All right, looking good. Number 7, what does the $2.2 million vacancy estimate already included in the budget translate into in terms of days of holding position vacancies open? So the 2.2 million vacancy estimate is holding positions open for 80 days. This folds into the next question. What is the net savings after that 2.2 million if we do a 90-day hold or a 120-day hold. So it looks like we get an additional 300,000 of savings for holding positions open 90 days, an additional 800,000 holding them open for 120. Any input on holding these positions open? I see Commissioner Denson.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, with this, seeing that additional $300,000 savings with just expanding an additional 10 days, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought whenever Commissioner Harrod kind of brought this up, 90 days is what was talked about that we've done previously in years past.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm definitely interested in then expanding that to 90 days and getting that additional $300,000 of savings.
All right. That sounds good to me, too. Any other input?
Me as well.
All right. Commissioner Harrod, then Commissioner Wright.
I just wanted to chime in that I also thought that was worth doing, and there might be more increments of that. It's good to know. What did you say that was, the 10-day equals?
No, we would be extending the hold to 90 days, and that would give a $2.5 million in savings.
Okay.
80 days gives us 2.2 million. 90 days gives us
2.5.
2.5.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Commissioner Harrod?
Thank you. So obviously, since I was the one that raised this issue, I'm interested in doing it. I would suggest even going to the 120 days because that gives us a bigger savings and it gives us a little bit more breathing room should the sales tax revenues after July 1 not prove to be as good as we might hope that they are. If they are better than we are projecting, then we have the ability to reduce that 120 days perhaps back to 90 days. But if they're worse than we're imagining, I think having that additional $500,000 between the 90 days and the 120 days might be worth kind of keeping in our back pocket.
And if I might, Commissioner Edwards, so there are things that are strategies to use real time to reduce budget impact, and I think that certainly the last year we recognized that we never have all of our positions fully staffed for the entire year, and what that was causing was a surplus at the end of the year. So we would tell you at the beginning of the year, this is a real tight budget, and then we'd always have this extra money come in. So we started last year with $1.5 million saying, we don't have these filled all the time, so we don't need to budget that way. This year we increased it to $2.2 million. And the one thing I would offer you is that this and furloughs, things like that, you want to have something in your quiver later in the year, as the Commissioner Harrod said, if things don't pan out. You don't want to, because at the same time, we're increasing the budget by new initiatives, and we're also employing some strategies that are oftentimes held in abeyance until you have to deal with the situation. When you extend it out 120 days, that's almost half the year. If we have crews that are running short, I just want to say that sometimes, it certainly makes it more difficult on the other workers in trying to keep up. And it could, for instance, if we have solid waste drivers, if we lose a couple to retirement and we can't hire them for 120 days, somebody has to do the work. And at some point, there's a law of diminishing returns. It's going to slow down some services. So I just want to caution you all on that, if that becomes a formal policy at this stage.
All right. Any other input on?
I have a little input on that 90 versus 120 days.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm also concerned about the impact of overtime. I assume that existing employees would have to put in a little overtime to make up for that vacant position. And I wonder,
is that correct, Manager Williams?
Well, it could be, and certainly so. And let me make this very simple for y'all. The 2.2 million, if you increase that to 2.5 million, that's not a formal hold all positions to 120 days. It's an estimate on how much that we will or won't have folks fully staffed, the fully staffed organization this year. If you make it a formal 120-day hold on positions, I'm just saying that could become, in certain situations, that could become impactful on services. And we can certainly analyze that.
If it becomes impactful, Manager Williams, could you bring an agenda item to us to amend?
Well, I could. I think what the policy was in the past, and we can uncover that for you, was that, and it was done even after I came here in 2013, that there was a hold unless the manager approved otherwise. And so there were certain cases where, like the one like I just used, the solid waste drivers that are critical. I mean, everybody is essential in this government, but there's some things that we can sort of suck up. And then when you have to have somebody in some of these roles, you just can't, that could be the same with some of our department directors, so that just, you need to have some flexibility to fill positions when they need to be filled. Okay. And if I do want to offer, I understand that our human resources director is on the call as well. Jeff, do you want to offer anything on this particular question?
Yeah, Glenn, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So I would agree with you that previously we had, get an echo.
Yeah. If everybody will mute, I think it'll help.
Previously, we had a 90-day hold, and the manager would approve positions to be filled that were justified as mission critical by the department director. And sometimes the manager would agree to fill a position immediately, and sometimes it was 90 days, and sometimes it was somewhere in between.
Okay, Commissioner Harris.
Thank you. And that's basically what I'm suggesting. I mean, I think the 120 days is an average. Some positions may take longer than 120 days to fill, given there may be a particular specialty and we may have to do a job search and make an offer to a candidate, and maybe that candidate turns us down and you have to go back to the pool, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm seeing this more as a sort of an average, as a goal, rather than a hard and fast rule, and that it gives the manager the opportunity that should there be some kind of mission critical need, that he could come back and request a budget amendment to do that. But I think the budget next year is going to be bad. I think that the tax digest, it's based upon the value of property on January the 1st. I don't think we're going to be through COVID by January the 1st. I think that's going to have some impact, particularly on the value of our commercial properties, which make up a significant proportion of our tax digest. And I think we should be planning in our budget for that. So I wouldn't want to say 120 days is a hard and fast, all positions must be kept open for 120 days. But I think if we're imagining that as being a kind of an average and a goal to achieve, I think that gives us a little bit more flexibility for what we might see over the next several months, particularly if our sales taxes decline, and then by the time we get to January 1, we will have a better idea of, it'll take a little bit of time for the digest to be calculated, but we'll have a little bit of a better idea, this time next year of what the tax digest is as well. And it just gives us a little bit of flexibility.
Sounds good. Commissioner Hamby?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Ooh, Teddy's brought us pizza. So, Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I agree with Commissioner Harrod. Just making sure that we have we could always make the budget amendments when we need to, but making sure we're planning ahead and preparing for what we need to prepare for. So I don't see any harm in holding non-essential positions for the 120 days. And if the manager or HR Jeff Hell need to amend that, then that's certainly something they can come and ask for. I remember when we had to do that before, and amendments were made. So I don't see any. I think it's a good budgetary thing for us to do during these times. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, that idea seems to enjoy.
Well, Russell, Commissioner, if I might, so I don't think in the past iteration each and every position was brought to the mayor and commission for approval. I think the manager made the call on the mission, the quote unquote mission critical, and sometimes it was situational, i.e. to Commissioner Link's point, this is going to cost us a lot more in overtime than it would be to fill the position. Can we go ahead and fill the position? And they would make a case. We have 1,700 employees, positions authorized roughly, and to go into I'm not sure that you may, but for us to come with an agenda item for each and every position that we want to accelerate. I mean, to Commissioner Harrod's point, for most positions, if we advertise, sometimes it's 5 days internal, sometimes it's a couple of weeks, sometimes it's a month, and then you've got a month, 6 weeks of processing. Most of the time, you've got about 60, 75 days automatic. And certainly we can hold some positions, and we can give you exactly how it was done before. But I think, as Jeff Hale said, the manager was able to, Mr. Reddish at the time was able to say, yeah, we'll go ahead and move on this because it makes more financial sense.
Okay, that sounds good. You can prepare that for us, how it was done before. We can take a look at that. That sounds good. I had Commissioner Wright and then Commissioner Hamby had a follow-up. Go ahead, Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, thank you. Another benefit that I perceive can happen with this longer time is it seems to me like it would be a good time for somebody to have an interim position and experience and have some new roles, whether they apply for a job that's vacant or not. There's things called Grow Your Own, and it sort of help people get some different experiences. So there could be some overlap or some additional training where somebody could be learning, being able to be an interim person for that 120 days while somebody else learned their tasks, or just some cross-pollinating in duties. I think that also could create an opportunity for people to know whether they want to do another skill set or not. It's just an opportunity that could present itself.
Great. Commissioner Hamby?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I think what we're trying to get at, Manager Williams, is like, our goal is to make sure that we find savings within our budget. And what we're suggesting is, if there is, or if there are opportunities to hold a position for 120 days, then let's do it. I mean, and if, certainly if somebody feels like there's a lot of overtime being paid, or we're not realizing the savings that we need to, then fine, fill the position. But I think the mindset is let's see what we can do with the 120 days and go from there. So that's my 2 cents worth on it.
Okay. Sounds good. So we'll get more feedback from Manager Williams over how that policy worked in the past, and then we can move forward. Next question. What is the savings to the general fund? Number 9, what is the savings to the general fund from implementing one furlough day? General fund, $320,405. All funds, $417,000, $356. Anybody have some input on furlough days and putting some of those into the budget just in case?
My opinion. Oh, sorry. This is Allison. My opinion is that we should keep that as a reserve as needed. if we find ourselves needing to trim later. That's my first thought on that.
Go ahead, Commissioner Lang.
I agree, but I would also ask that we implement a policy where if we are to furlough employees, we start with higher paid employees first, kind of follow the policy that UGA apparently is setting, where higher paid employees are subject to this furlough days at a greater impact.
Melissa, the UGA's cutoff is maximum salary of $33,500, and those under that salary and lower do not get furloughed.
Yeah,
and then there's 3 brackets.
I think it's like the higher you get paid, the more days you get. Like
it is.
You're more probably going to be.
I've got a
weeks this year.
Yeah, I can share that so that people have it. But that's also what I meant about us understanding what our other entities are doing, the state level UGA, so that we are aware of that to be dialed into a similar set as needed.
Yeah, I think that there's some equity issues we can implement.
Well, Manager Williams, have we implemented a tiered furlough policy before, to your knowledge?
No, sir. It's the furlough. Well, let me just make this clear. There was furloughs anticipated in the last downturn, but never executed, is my understanding. And some of the commissioners, Commissioner Harrod being one, were here at that time. So I will say, just by way of update and referring to an earlier question, my understanding is that Commissioner Kemp has downgraded his requested cut from 14% to 11%. And so when we talk about these state-funded institutions and trying to keep up with them, they have a different demand being placed on them, both the university and the school district, than we do.
Understood. So maybe a suggestion as we move forward would be that we develop a policy for tiered furloughs, so that if we do have to go to that, that's already in place, and just put that into the agenda cycle. And then the public knows that that's something that we're set to do as needed. I think it's would look good for us to be ready for that as needed.
If we're going to plan for furloughs, should we make that apparent in the budget? And I guess that's an open question. Manager Williams or Attorney Drake, if we're going to put people on furlough, should we bake that into the budget that we pass for this upcoming fiscal year?
Well, I just want to say at the outset here that usually, 80% of our cost as a government is people. We are in the business of delivering services. And if you're going to, on the very front end of the budget, if you're going to couple, holding positions for 120 days, and then also for other people not having them come to work, then we're not having people at work. And I would just suggest that perhaps we cut some of the new initiatives that we're trying to accomplish, so that, because to me, I think the default is we want to continue to provide the services that folks have come to expect.
I guess my putting a finer point on my question, if there's a budget emergency down the road, say November, December, is there anything stopping us from passing legislation to enact a furlough if we had not yet done that prior in that fiscal year budget?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Harrod, then Commissioner Neesmith.
Well, I was just going to say, the last time we did this, which was several years ago, there were, if I remember correctly, I think it was 6 furlough days, but don't quote me on that number, that we talked about at the beginning of the budget, when we implemented the budget. But at the end of the day, we didn't actually have to have our employees take any of those 6 days, because the budget ended up being better than we had anticipated it being. And so if we do go down this route, I would want it to be made clear that even though it's included in the budget, we would only request that or require that if it became necessary, and that if our revenues, particularly sales taxes, are better than we're anticipating, then we wouldn't require that to happen. So it gives us a little bit of flexibility, rather than saying there will be X numbers of days at the beginning, and everybody will be furloughed X numbers of days. That's not how we did it in the past. And as I say, in the past, we got by with actually not having to have any furlough days.
Commissioner Neesmith?
I agree with that, and I also like Allison's idea. We don't need to bake furloughs into the budget. We need to make it a reasonable budget so that we can perhaps avoid furloughs as long as possible. But if we thought through a policy, and then it's going to be much better understood what our furlough policy is if we have to use it. So I like the idea of what Allison said. Let's get some policy in place and approve it that gives us some rules for furlough if we need it.
Okay, so preparing a tiered furlough policy should we need it. Sounds good. All right, number 10, answer provided by management regarding the employee contributions to healthcare and the government contributions to healthcare. Any questions on the healthcare premium payments? Okay, seeing no questions on that, we got number 12.
Sorry.
Did somebody say something?
Yes, Commissioner Davenport here.
Yep, go for it.
I would just like for Mr. Hale just to explain to the employees the item number 10, the healthcare, and I think later down the road there's another questions about other options.
Okay. Is Mr. Hale still on the call?
I am. I'm searching for a specific question to answer, though.
It's number 10 in the budget session answers. I don't know if you have that document, but it's basically Commissioner Davenport was hoping you could give a summation of the health insurance cost increases to employees for fiscal year 2021.
Well, generally, we're a self-insured fund, which gives us the opportunity to manage our claims and have our premiums set based on our claims experience. So the way to hold claims costs down and in turn our premium costs for both the government and employees is to stay healthy. And so we have a planning cycle that begins shortly after this process is finished. We start over for the next year. And we, over the summer and early fall, we receive reports from Anthem, from our carriers on utilization and on our experience that gets analyzed with analytics. We have actuarial work done on the prior years and market intelligence to sort of project what we can expect the following year, and that then is translated into some cost shares between us and the employees for insurance premiums. And as you know, we have several plans. I would say generally, and I'll let Tracy Mason also speak to this, but healthcare goes up every year regardless. This is not something that is an Athens-Clarke County. This is a market that is dysfunctional. And we manage it through a self-insured program and a very aggressive wellness program. As I said earlier, the way to keep costs down is to stay healthy. So, every year we go through that cycle. And for this year, we have tried to hold things as steady as we can. But this is what that process yielded in terms of premium costs as our cost shares are applied. Tracy, do you want to add anything to that if you're out there?
I'm here. Sorry, there's an echo. I think you covered that very well, Jeff. That's exactly how we manage that fund. But if the commissioners do have any follow-up questions, I'll be glad to answer those best I can.
Yes. I would just like for us to to promote more ACC wells for the ACC employees, because if that's a way to drive down costs, I would like to see more promotion. I forget the lovely lady's name. I think it's Jennifer who's heading that.
Kendra and Randy.
Kendra and Randy, and that's a great way to explain to employees to help lower costs, because the healthcare cost is expensive, and one of the stresses is knowing the fact that it's going to go up every year. But just a more promotion of ACC wells. And there was a question about self-pay, the difference between self-pay and group pay. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes, sir. And first of all, Commissioner Davenport, thank you for bringing up the wellness program. Kendra and Randy both do a great job. And to kind of address what you just pointed out, we are consistently working on improved communication plans so that we can promote and communicate the benefits of the wellness program better. And so that is part of our ongoing effort. So just know we do take that quite seriously. But to address your concern or question about self-funded versus fully funded, by being self-funded, there are a couple of benefits that we have. We are able to kind of avoid paying certain fees and taxes that are associated with fully funded plans that we do not have to pay as a self-funded plan. We also have more control over plan design by being self-funded. We have an option of either opting in or opting out of certain state mandates that come across for insurance plans. Another big benefit with being self-funded, and this kind of goes back to the wellness program, because we're self-funded, we do have a lot more access to analytic data that we can, of course, comb through, analyze, and determine exactly what our cost drivers are, so that we can better form our wellness activities and strategies. We would lose all of that control if we were fully funded. The other benefit of being self-funded is the years that we do have a good claims experience year where we come in under budget, those funds stay within Athens-Clarke County. That goes back into the fund balance. If we were a fully funded plan, and of course, again, fully funded plans, those rates are based on experience, just like a self-funded plan is. But on those years where we come in under budget, that money does not come back into the plan fund. That stays with the insurance company. So we do, again, we have a lot more control, a lot more access to data. And again, we have access to those funds on those good plan years.
All right, great.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, go for it, Commissioner.
I have my hand up, but
yeah, I can't see any hands. I'm sorry, it's not on my portal. But if you text me or just come on in, go for it.
I was listening to everything, and my question is totally not in line in the process that we're going, how listed. But I would like, and I know that Commissioner Davenport really is very supportive of the increases. And one of the reasons he mentioned is because the cost of health care going up every year. Manager Williams, can we get the numbers for those people who make $50,000 and less, what that would look like with the increases? People who are making $50,000 and less. Could you get that information for us, please?
Show me reality.
I'll make sure I understand the question, Commissioner Thornton. And so you're asking with respect to the health insurance, or?
No, I'm just talking about the increase now. And that was one of Commissioner Davenport's support of increases, because the health insurance is one of the items that is going up. I just want to see what that looked like.
Well, let me tell you that, so of the 2.5% recommended pay increase of 1.5% would go towards performance pay. So based on their evaluation from their supervisor, they get a numerical score, and then that whole department, the raises are distributed accordingly. So somebody may get a little bit more than somebody else based on their score. The other 1% of the 2.5% is for cost of living. That's more across the board. So it's a function of both how much they're making at the time, as well as how they did on their score relative to other people in their department. So in order to give you what you're asking for, Commissioner Thorne, it'd almost have to be, of course, we wouldn't have names, but it'd be like on an individual basis. And that would only be after we got all of the scores in and applied the scores accordingly. I'm sorry to make that difficult, but that's just how that whole process works.
No. I'm still trying to wrap my head around, how we can make sure we're equitable with rate increases. So I will call you tomorrow, because I still want to be. I really want to have the best clarity on this as possible. So I will call you tomorrow.
Well, and yes, ma'am. But while we've got Jeff Hill, and then this has come up again, and so I want to be clear that we're under a pay and classification study, which the equity was fleshed out with our latest pay and comp plan. The equity was trued up, and I understand the commissioners have a feeling that folks that make more than a certain amount shouldn't get a pay increase, but the nature of the pay structure is that it is equitable, and that as you apply these pay increases, and you've got two factors here, of course, the COLA, cost of living increase, and a merit increase, and every few years you come back and revisit to make sure that everything is equitable. And so, Jeff, I had attempted to talk a little bit about how a classification system works with regards to internal and external equity, but I don't know if you care to offer anything to that.
Well, sure. I think you've hit the points pretty well. There's equity with the market. In other words, we want to pay our police officer or our carpenter or electrician comparably to other people, so we can be competitive, and so that we can pay a fair wage for the work that's being done. We then have internally a need to align pay where similar work with similar hazards and education requirements and training or certification requirements are grouped together, so that we are paying people who do similar work under similar circumstances relatively the same. And so with that, we also have a layer of federal law in there that requires that we're paying people based on those objective job-related factors and not anything else. We are in a government classification system as opposed to the private sector, which I want to give you money for more because I like the tie you wear and the way that you talk to me. I can do that. We're not in that situation. I'm not suggesting anybody wants to do that, but we do have to be very careful and mindful about how we administer that system. And I don't know if that helps with formulating your question. Maybe it doesn't.
Again, I'm going to call you, Manager Williams, because I think I'm going in another. I'm trying to make another point, and I don't want to make it. We can talk tomorrow if that's okay with you, Manager Williams.
Yes, ma'am. Of course.
Great. All right. Next question, number 11. Any input on the Sheriff Jail Inmate Health Services contract? Number 11.
Manager Blaine Williams, I'm sorry. I did ask to see the contract that we're under now, and I'm sorry if you sent it and I have not seen it.
I have a little input.
Wait a minute. I just want to know, did I miss the contract?
It's one of the emails Blaine sent. It's
I missed it. Okay, go for it.
I mean, I don't necessarily, I haven't read the whole thing, but I do want to say I did have a brief conversation with Auditor Maddox, and the audit of this contract is, I believe she said it was set to go to the sheriff's office this week for a reply. So we'll actually be seeing that document any day now. So I kind of think, we should take a look at it. And I mean, from what I understand, there are some issues, questions about procurement costs and line items that aren't on track of. But yeah, I kind of think we should take a good look at that document and question this contract, especially and other jail items too. Considering our inmate population is way down, I do question the need for some budget pieces there.
Manager Williams, when does this contract expire? I'm looking at it.
I'm like you, and I think Commissioner Link's right. I think it's imminent, and it has been re-advertised. So I was looking for those terms. Just for everybody that has not seen it, this latest contract was approved in June of 2017, and I believe it was structured for. Well, I don't want to say, I might be mistaken, but oftentimes I'll have I think like most contracts, I mean, you can get out of it when you want to. I think this was estimated. This was could be up to a 5-year contract, and they have some escalators there as well. So the pricing is set out into the future. And that's a benefit to both the company and knowing what's coming their way as well as the government to know what the expected cost in any ensuing year would be.
Could you let us know when that contract renews and whether or not it's out for bid?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. That could help guide our conversation. Commissioner Denson.
Thank you. Yeah, and from what I can see here, yeah, it is a 5-year contract, and I have a problem with this contract and this service using these for-profit jail services to provide our medical. I understand that it's common practice now.
Let me know. All right.
But it also provides problematic services. I mean, I know that I have heard from sheriff's deputies and people who work at our jail that this often results in very expensive bills for people being sent to the hospital for services, and the billing increases highly. And also, I've heard from people staying in the jail, and also again from people working there, inadequate services being provided, of complications with the provider. And as I compiled and I know shared years ago when this contract was first being discussed, there is a history behind this company of many, many issues, including multiple deaths across the country, multiple lawsuits across the country. And I would really like us to explore at least going back to what at one time we used, which was just more of a service that we had more local medical providers ones providing those services here. And I would like us to explore options that don't require us using some of these for-profit prison companies. And I hope that we could somehow insert that into the RFP process.
Okay. Any other input on the sheriff jail medical contract?
And Commissioner, to clarify, it is the initial term of the agreement was 1 year, and then could be renewed for 4 1-year extension periods. Either party can get out of this within either 30 or 120 days.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Neesmith, did you have something?
I apologize. I was trying to get your attention earlier, but I wanted to go back to the insurance just right briefly. Commissioner Thornton's question caused me to wonder, is the 1% COLA raise going to cover for everyone the increase in insurance costs? That's the question. You may have to research it, but I'm curious.
So does the COLA raise cover the increased amount that employees are going to have to pay towards their premium?
And just to help, that's the question we normally ask ourselves. And so you'd have to, what we'd have to do is to look at our lowest paid employee who may have the highest coverage of insurance, which in this case would be the POS conventional family. And so just to help you understand, that is an increase of about $80 a month. And so the lowest paid employee, the 1% would have to represent about $1,000 of increase. And I don't believe that's the case, Commissioner, but we'll give you the exact figures.
Thank you.
Yeah, probably not, because a 1% increase of $1,000 a month. I mean, that's a high salary, right?
It's $1,000 a year. I'm sorry. It's $80 a month, so $960 for the year.
Okay. Okay.
And that's why there are different tiers of insurance, so that you can figure out what you can afford.
Right. All right, great. We'll get that from Manager Williams. So number 12, state mandated ratio of correctional officers to inmates question. Any input on that? Okay. Then we got the downtown camera question. We covered that. Waiting for more info on that. Then we got tell her you want to go on a walk. And then we got number 14. What are the costs for walk down there? What are the costs for applying for historic designation status? No costs. Any questions on that historic designation question? All right, number 15. What is the process for?
I just wanted to go for a walk too. Can I be dismissed?
Yeah, maybe we'll take 5 when we get to the bottom of this. We got 2 more questions. What are the costs? Okay, process for applying for historic designation to get the tax credit or the tax freeze. Any clarifying question needed on that? Thought that was a good job answering that one. Number 16, cost savings in leisure services due to summer camp cancellation. Looks like we're waiting to see what the revenue loss is going to be. But we might be saving hundreds of thousands from summer camps being canceled. So, all right, thus concludes the manager answer portion of the meeting. So would y'all like to, we've been at it about an hour and a half, take 5, and then we'll come back and start with Commissioner Parker and Denson's proposals, and then Commissioner Hemby, Wright, Thornton, Davenport, and Harris proposals. That sound good?
Sounds good.
Take a motion to recess for 5 minutes.
So moved.
Sounds good.
All in favor?
That sounds good.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, unanimous consent. Let's take 5. We'll come back soon.
All right, we are back live here with continuing conversation about our FY21 budget. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're continuing down our agenda for the hearing. And next up, we've got an overview of a set of budget proposals presented for consideration by Commissioners Parker and Denson. So if y'all would like to take it away and perhaps give us a summation and take some questions.
I think Commissioner Parker is going to go first.
This is like my thing, you know? This is like my calling card. Anyway, hi everyone. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So broadly, what Tim and I are calling for, all public safety related changes that I feel, especially in light of recent events in Athens, are very necessary and very well supported by the public. General fund items include the addition of a mental health co-responder team for ACCPD. If implemented in the third quarter, that'd be, I guess, by the manager's recent calculations, would be about $175,000 for a full year, or if brought in for 9 months, brought in during the second quarter, would be $111,000. We'd like to fund a social work position for the public defender's office at $57,100 and commission a study on the creation of a plan for a 10-year tiered move towards 50% of ACCPD force being transitioned towards other forms of community response, including social workers, mental health professionals, and restorative justice practitioners, among other forms of community response. From special revenue funds, we're asking for the implementation of the ACCPD dispatch option 4 to bring the EMS dispatch in-house, which would be $292,000 taken from the E911 fund balance. So I want to just talk a little bit about some research and thinking behind, particularly the police department asks in this budget. So as perhaps many of you all are aware, our crime rate in Athens is falling right now. Crimes against persons are down 2.4% from 2019. Assault crimes are steadily decreasing. Total burglaries, including residential, are down 16.6% from 2019, and crimes against property are down 19% as a whole. Fraud by false pretenses have gone up, but this is the kind of crime that, like many things, doesn't require an armed response. Other things like robberies, burglaries, larcenies are all down by 44, 16, and 27% respectively. And then we are currently at 254 sworn officers in the department with a lot of vacancies. But I think what this data shows us is that we don't necessarily need more police officers in order to keep Athens safe. Crime is organically decreasing despite the vacancies that we have. And I have asked the manager a couple of times now about potentially eliminating those vacancies from the authorized positions in this budget, and haven't really heard a concrete response regarding what sort of budget impact that would have monetarily. If we could use that mechanism to fund the additional mental health co-responder unit, that would be great. But if not, we could turn to either the 90-day hold on vacancies in the government, which is generating $300,000, or the life cycle extension on administrative vehicles, which is also $300,000, to cover all of the general fund asks that Commissioner Denson and I have made. I know particularly the plan, maybe folks aren't well researched in some of the other measures that other municipalities are taking along these lines to reduce their police force and introduce other forms of community response into their total suite of kinds of response possible. But in Kansas City, they conducted a study of different policing methods, specifically around the amount of police patrols and how it would affect the crime rate. So essentially, they sent more patrols than normal into one area, only reactive patrols into a different area, and then they kept one area the same. The study was conducted for 1 year and found there were no significant differences among the three experimental conditions concerning recorded crime, reported victimization, citizen fear of crime, citizen satisfaction with the police response time, arrests, traffic accidents, or other major indicators. So if we were to reduce some of the authorized positions in the police department and use that as a source of funding for the mental health co-responder unit, there is evidence to suggest that it will not impact the citizen satisfaction with the police, reported victimization, other measures of policing success, and our own data from Athens regarding the reduction in crime recently supports that. But a few words on some of the other kinds of response that are already being implemented in other cities around the country that could be used, that could inform part of this plan we're asking for. In Lansing, the police employ a social worker that engages in police and community services for people who are mentally ill, homeless, or fighting substance abuse. Dallas is pioneering an approach where social workers are being dispatched for some 911 calls that involve mental health emergencies, and the program has shown success. In Oregon, I believe, or perhaps Washington, there's a program called Cahoots. I think Commissioner Thornton has brought up Cahoots before when we've talked about the potential for phasing in other kinds of response at, our priority retreats and things like that. So Cahoots is a mobile social service contracted by the city that deals with homelessness, intoxication, disorientation, substance abuse, mental illness problems, and dispute resolution that can be contacted through the police non-emergency dispatch. They don't carry weapons, they don't detain and arrest people, and it's just designed to help people resolve conflict and gain access to services that they need to prevent them from getting involved in the criminal justice system in the first place. So this work is being undertaken across the country. We could bring in a think tank like the Campaign Zero project that can bring to bear a lot of their research on best practices and evidence-based practices for other forms of community response to replace an armed response to conflict. And so that's what we're looking to do. So these things can be covered, again, with either the extension of the life cycle replacement program for administrative vehicles, or an extension to 90 days for keeping vacancies open. So I hope that you all will get behind us in supporting those things.
Great, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Oh, yeah, delay somehow.
Still have that echo. Commissioner Parker, thank you.
Okay, got it. Great. I think Commissioner Parker laid it out very well. And just to build on some of these things, had a graduate student, Jake Taylor from UGA SPIA program, did a lot of research on this, showing that in the long run, there's actual savings going this direction from police departments that have utilized this. Louisville, Kentucky was studied. They had 2,400 crisis intervention calls annually that had an overall cost that came out to about $2.4 million. But the annual savings that they saw was about 3.5, giving them a savings balance of over $1 million there. And I think the big thing here is beyond even the money, though. I think we all realize here that without any specialized training, we are sending the men and women of our police force into situations that they are not fully prepared for, and are not fully even the most adequate force to respond to. But the problem here is that we don't have that adequate response mechanism or entity doesn't exist. And so therefore, in that vacuum, we have to rely on our police force. Not only is this not ideal for these officers, it can also create confusing and volatile situations, which unfortunately we know can sometimes end in violent and even deadly These incidents are extremely tragic for the victims and the families, but also the psychological toll this takes on our law enforcement officers is saddening, but avoidable. And I think that it is, while other entities, I don't know of an entity that has taken the bold step that Commissioner Parker and I are advocating for. I think you can look at the data and the situations happening across the country and also here in our own community. If we just think about last year, we need to fill that vacuum of mental health response, of community support response with an adequate entity for the well-being of our community, for its constituents, and also for our law enforcement officers. And I think that a $50,000 investment into studying this and trying to come up with an implementation plan over a 10-year tier structure is a fantastic investment, well worth every single dollar. Going into adding another co-responder team, I think we all support this. We all understand how well that system is working, which only supports us moving a greater force into it. And I think this makes sense in a lot of ways with us trying to move towards less arrests, less people being taken to jail, less negative effects on individuals, for us embracing pre-arrest diversion programs and us trying to move towards citation rather than arrest. I think that our move towards this new idea of what our police force is, of social workers, of community response rather than law enforcement, fits perfectly in that groove. As I want to really quickly speak to the few other things that we have on there, mainly being the social worker for the public defender office. Again, the DA's office has multiple social worker positions, which work well, and we are choosing to continue to fund those in this budget. But the public defender office has inadequate. I think they only have one at this time, and that social worker position has proven to be extremely effective. Overall, have cost savings to the community, and also, of course, limit negative effects on individuals who come into our criminal justice system. So again, that $57,000 to include another social worker position, I think is well worth it. I think we're all on the same page about having the equitable increase for public defender salaries and operation expenses, which comes to $45,000. And so the last thing I just want to bring up, which these funds will come from the special revenue fund of the E911 fund and not the general fund, is us implementing option 4 to bring our EMS dispatch completely in-house. Again, this is an option that was first recommended by our own police force dispatch team back in 2017. It was again recommended in 2019. We have right now currently budgeted $428,000 in the E911 fund balance. This would again cost $292,000 that we can take from the E911 balance, still leaving us over $130,000 in that balance. So again, this is something that we can do without having to get involved in increasing revenues coming in. So I think there's I look forward to hearing from the other commissioners on the proposal that they put out today. I think there's a lot of overlap, but I think these things that we're addressing here are all built upon programs that we already have working that we know work, and I think that we know that they are sound investments. And I will also put out that that there is, I believe, great community support behind these, based on just the current situation in our community and again across the nation, and that these proposals here are supported by the Georgia ACLU as steps forward for us to create a safer, more healthy community. So I hope that rest of the commission supports this. And also, I'll say that this proposal does include the partial rollback that Mayor Gertz has already proposed and that is included with these totals that we have here. Thank you.
The partial millage rate rollback, correct?
Yes, the partial millage rate rollback that was already in Mayor Griffith's proposal.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. All right. Let's move to
I have
questions on the proposal. I see you, Commissioner Lane. Go for it.
Yeah, I really appreciate Commissioner Denson and Parker's work on this, and I think it's exactly the direction we need to be going. I certainly believe we need to get on adding another mental health co-responder team as soon as possible. And I do understand the research in decreasing crime rates, especially with technology kind of filling the gaps in police work more and more these days. There's creepy feelings about surveillance cameras and stuff, but the research does show that when people know they might get busted, they're less likely to commit petty crimes. And it seems like more and more people have these Ring cameras. And so I do see that the crime rate is going down, and it's a time to really transform the way we keep our community safe. And I think that this idea of a $50,000 study of a transition, I think that instead of going in that direction, we could simply appoint some of these community task forces that are made up of folks from within our community, both from law enforcement, the judicial system, as well as all kinds of community organizations that end up having some impact on the criminal justice system. Folks who are in drug rehabilitation, domestic violence advocates, CASA, other community leaders, church leaders, mental health folks, public defenders, certainly making sure our public defenders intimately know the issues that folks are facing when they end up in the criminal justice system. I would like to see this kind of move be a community-based effort, where we have that task force kind of understanding how this transition needs to be made. And I want to advocate for a police accountability board that can sit down with our police force and help develop policies and procedures on how our police interact in certain situations, and how they are accountable when things go the wrong way. So that's my 2 cents at this point.
If I could respond, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much. Mr. Parker.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that any sort of plan needs to be developed with the community. We need insights of people who understand some of the things that give rise to crime in our communities, who have been successful in implementing programs of their own to decrease crime and to mitigate crime. But as well, we need data scientists, and we need policy research experts, and we need folks that have launched similar programming in other communities and can bring that expertise to bear. So if we could fund a process by which these groups interface to leverage expertise in evidence-based practices, as well as bringing to bear community knowledge, I think that is the ideal scenario, but one that probably won't happen for free. And so that's why I'm really advocating for actually funding that planning process.
I was going to agree with. I'm sorry, I don't know that echo.
Commissioner. Yeah. Okay, it's gone. Commissioner Thornton.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I agree with. I understand what Commissioner Parker is saying about having that data. The problems that we're having now are so important, and I do think there are some things we can do. And when monies are flowing better, we could look into. I don't want to say start researching after we, start doing the work, but I still struggle with any more studies, period. I would like to see more of where I think we should be doing something, and we should look at another place, a model that, and see if we can use it here without a study and move forward. I say that because since all of this has happened with George Floyd, it has come. It's a memory of what happened in 1996 with Edward Wright's killing by a police officer. And when we look back, there were recommendations made, there was research done, but I don't know how much changes were made. I think we could go back into the annals of what happened in between 1996 and now. Most of the young African American young ladies and men, they would remember Edward Wright, and a lot of us have forgotten. So before we invest in a study, I would rather see what we did or what we didn't do, and what we need to do before we put money into another study. Now, I say this, everybody knows that I'm very biased about studies, period. So it's not that I don't think it's a good idea. I just think that now is a good time to put our monies into something more tangible.
All right, we have Commissioner Davenport, then Commissioner Parker, then Commissioner Denson.
Yes. So I do like little bits and pieces of the Parker and Denson study, but I would love to hear, and I do want to just make the comment that, like, and I appreciate the community feedback.
I think we lost you.
I'm sorry, it's my cat. I swear, she's getting on my nerves.
Sure.
But like, so I do like little bits and pieces of the Parker Denson initiative, but I just have more questions because most of the people who contacted me via email and phone call, they really couldn't clarify the details because the devil's always in the details, and I would just like to learn more. I'd like to hear from Chief Spruill and what he thinks about the study, and I agree with not Parker. I do. I agree with Thornton. Like, I can't do any more studies. I mean, we're in a flagship institution. We got a lot of wealth of information, a lot of professional folks, and we got a lot of people on the ground in our judicial system who will be who'll be able to to lend some type of support and helping us with this with doing the study instead of paying the money and all that stuff. But I would really like to because I hate reactionary politics because I think that can be really bad for future generations. But I would really like to hear just get feedback from the police department. And I also like to say that crime may be down, but that's not the only job that our police officers do. Like traffic control and other community work is essential as well. And the little research that I did do, because I did not have enough time with all the stuff going on, there were a couple of cities that are implementing like situations like cahoots and stuff like that, but they're not actually I'm still trying to verify that they're actually reducing the police force and then transferring to community engagement and mental health, because from the research that I've done, and it is not complete, is that departments across the country are being reduced because it's hard to find police officers, and most of these police departments are just adding additional mental health support instead of reducing. But I just still have a lot of questions, and just would like to speak with Chief Spruill and staff.
All right, great. Commissioner Parker, you're muted.
really good at this. So to address some of the concerns that were raised, starting with Commissioner Link, with having a community-based process for this, a lot of these people who, Avita is also talking about, who've been doing this work in this community for a long time, are doing this work for free out of the goodness of their hearts. And, a lot of these folks, who are African American, have been giving free labor to this community of various kinds for a very long time. And so to look at how these funds could be used for stipends for participants, for community-based facilitators, and things like that, so that we are actually rewarding the work that folks have done in the community that Commissioner Thornton is describing, and rewarding their involvement in this process. With Ovita's concerns about how many studies we've done, I also am a little wary of this local government's tendency to commission research into issues and then shelving those documents and not, using them for anything. But I think a role that funding this process could play is having someone bring out that previous research and synthesize it. I've heard Commissioner Link talk about this before with a variety of different issues of, how difficult it would be for us with the multitude of things that we are taking on as commissioners to set aside time to synthesize the findings of previous studies to determine the best path forward. But funding a process like this could actually do more to honor the work that is already being done by having someone formally synthesize it and not only just say, hey, this is what I think I should do, but like it being tangible in a way of like setting out a tiered system by which we, if we follow those steps year by year, we're implementing things that are going to make a difference in our community. And then to answer one of Commissioner Davenport's questions about the way that this work is happening in other communities, I think he's right in identifying that departments are having a hard time attracting and retaining qualified staff. And I think that speaks to a little bit of what Commissioner Denson was saying earlier, of this problem of the police are being asked to do so much. They're being asked to do social work. They're being asked to respond to mental health crises. They're being asked to mediate conflict. Whereas other municipalities are seeing this and bringing in folks that are specifically trained to do those things, rather than unfairly relying upon police officers to do it all. So you're right in identifying why that's happening in other communities. But I think if we follow, what our attrition rates are for Athens-Clarke County and tier a plan around that, if officers are, naturally finding, naturally transitioning to work in other communities or in other professions, bringing in folks that are specifically trained to deal with the variety of kinds of community crises we have here in Athens, is what other places are doing and what we could absolutely do here without at all interfering with the current work of the police department.
All right, then Denson, Commissioner Parker, please.
Oh, thank you.
Commissioner Denson, then Commissioner Link.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I think Commissioner Parker said a lot of what I was planning on doing. But yeah, the idea that I agree we should have that community component, individuals in this community who know this community have been working to be part of this. And whenever I say plan, I very much think that could be, the way it actually comes about is a working group with a facilitator, similar to the style of how we came up with a plan that led to the creation of our Office of Inclusion. Started off, and I think that was like our first foray into doing it that way. I know that had its own hiccups, but I think it obviously proved fruitful in actually creating that office. I think that we can build off of that structure to make it even better. But we need funding for that, to feed participants, to have a stipend for participants, to pay for a facilitator who is familiar with this topic, who can pull that research from other entities and compare how other places are doing it and find the best fit for here in Athens-Clarke County. So I think we're on the same page. Just I think what Mr. Forker and I are saying is like, to do all those things properly, it takes some funding. And that's the reason for the $50,000 as part of this. And if we're and I definitely agree that this should be looking into the history of Athens-Clarke County, going back to Edgar Wright. I agree with Commissioner Thornton. I think that that situation is not discussed enough, and we should reevaluate what the proposals were that were made there, which ones weren't enacted, which ones were enacted, and did those things work? I know a lot of that led to us creating some of the substations that we have around the county, but then we don't even have the funding to man those substations. And the last thing I'll say on this is that, I think that the great work that we've done as a team here working through this is that we have found some ways to balance the budget to be able to include these things without having to increase any more revenues or digging into our unassigned fund balance. I think we can do the expanding vacancy time to 120 days, as Commissioner Herod has advocated for, and then also the reduction in the DA supplements in a way that's not political, but is more just working us towards getting an equitable structure between our public defenders and them. Those cuts will get us there. So I hope that, again, the rest of the commission supports this, and then also supports the moving the E911 option for dispatch, which of course, again, we can balance that by simply pulling from the E911.
All right, great. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's some data we could get kind of off the bat from Chief Spruill's folks about the current services of the mental health responder team, how many calls they've responded to, and an idea of how many other calls they likely could have responded to. I mean, that might take some coordination with the public defender's office for folks who actually ended up getting arrested for stuff like criminal trespass, domestic violence, disorderly conduct, all the litany of charges that result from a mental health incident. If I would like to see some data about that team and off the bat and how effective it's been. I've, heard kind of anecdotal evidence, but, I believe that there's probably plenty of information out there, and I can certainly look back to, I believe it was 2008, we had a criminal justice task force with recommendations, and a lot of our accountability courts came out of that. And one of the recommendations that was not followed up upon was for a criminal justice coordinating committee, or I believe that's what it was called, I can't remember, but a standing citizen committee that would develop these kind of new programs, policies, procedures, and kind of mold our system as the world changes, because the world is changing rapidly. So, I don't think it would take much digging at all to find some really solid information. And yeah, we definitely need to go back to Edward Wright's murder to find out what's been missed since then.
Just a quick historical note. I sat on the 2008 Criminal Justice Committee that Commissioner Link referenced, and the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee contemplated at the time was really more a sort of department level kind of entity. I think what you're thinking about is sort of closer to the task force that's underway now, sort of on the street.
I mean, definitely an entity that includes representatives from, staff and members from our police and our judicial system, but also members from the community, mental health, drug rehab, child advocacy, domestic violence advocacy, all that stuff, as well as some general community representatives.
Great. Any other input on the package of Denson and Parker proposals?
Again, I think it's I think the intent of the proposal is definitely good. I think I heard from Commissioner Link about this committee or task force possibility to build that in. And I would suggest if we took that step first, and we recommended the meat of the proposal for the research, if that came from that task force, I think that would also, I think, I don't want to, I think something from the task force, that would be a real good recommendation to have that type of research done. So I think it's a good idea. We know that mental health is an issue. I've heard Dr. Lakeisha Gant says we've got to work to where mental health is the norm, that we handle it like any other healthcare issue. I want to remind people also, and it got very, 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 very little play or attention in the community, even from us as commissioners. I think it was last year or the year, it had to be last year because I was on the commission. And the police actually talked the young man down from committing suicide on that train trestle. And nobody, and whatever skills that officer had to help, we kind of brushed it aside. So there are those, it's really important to equip our officers with those kind of people-to-people skills, but it wasn't talked about. We didn't talk about it in the commission meeting. But if we have some officers that have these skills, we should build on them and expand it. But we should also recognize when those types of moments happen. So everything is not always negative about the police that we're hearing. So I think it's a good proposal. I just would rather not put the money directly right now into that research. I would love to see what data that the accountability courts have. Because I do think the proposal does lead us in the right direction.
Okay, we've got Commissioner Davenport, Neesmith, and then let's maybe close out discussion of these proposals, giving Commissioner Parker the last word.
Okay, so Commissioner Thornton kind of touched on some of the things I was going to say, but it just here, I'm still waiting for the police task force that, even though there's some empirical data that say they're not that effective, but, and here we are, we're going down to another study to, but I just think the Parker Denson proposal, there's some things that we can agree on, and there's some things we can't, or we just need more clarification. I would still like to get more clarification on, from the police force and what an actual police officer does, and what does it look like with the proposal. But I also want to go back to option number 4 and get and this is for Manager Blaine. So in the budget, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in the budget, Chief Kelly is asking for an implementation of 10 dispatchers to help with medical response time. And we're asking for option number 4. I just want to make sure that is correct, but to also say that option number 4 is, there's more detail to it, and that's where the E911 funds is going to come from.
Well, what's proposed in the budget currently is option 3, and that is 8 positions, partial year, anticipating that 4 would be hired in September and 4 again in January.
So stop right there. Thank you. Just for the viewing public. So that's what's in the budget now. But to do option 4 there's some technical stuff that needs to be done. There's some synergy. Because from what I'm hearing from constituents is what's proposed in the budget and what we are actually saying, we're not going to get to the point of a faster response time. Or maybe I'm saying that wrong, but just clarify to the general public what's proposed in the budget and what the details and the nuances of option number 4. I'm not, I'm for, I'm for, faster response time and option number 4, but just there's some nuances that need to be hashed out.
Yes, sir. So both option 3 and option 4 are meant to improve outcomes for folks that call the 911 center. In both cases, there are additional staff that are added because calls would become lengthier, as all of the call takers would be trained in electronic medical dispatch, and they would be able to talk to the caller and provide them some instructions on how to mitigate the situation that they're in. And so sort of a direct caretaker provision of care until somebody shows up, whether it's our fire department or national EMS. This is true with option 4. I think option 4 really seeks to have a single dispatch from our 911 center to the ambulances or trucks are run by national EMS. Now, there are some technical issues with connecting our communication system to theirs. I've mentioned to y'all before, but for folks that are watching this, National EMS is on the Southern Link system. That's something that Georgia Power has used extensively, and we're on a P25 800 megahertz system. And so those two don't. There's some things that we don't have that would require those to directly talk to one another. Chief Sproul, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but that's my understanding, that there are some technical difficulties that would at this time prevent us from reaching option 4.
Okay, sir. So we have Captain Kelly on, and I think he's in a better position to answer that question. So I'm going to defer that question to him if it's okay with you.
Of course.
Captain Kelly. Captain Kelly, go ahead. Give me 1 minute and I'll get him up, sir. So he's still trying to get connected. The technical issues are, and this is some resources as well. Hold on, he's calling me. Hold on. Hey, Keith, can you hear me? Technical issues are, some resources as well. Can you hear me, Keith?
Yes, sir, I'm on.
Okay, I'm on speaker. Go ahead and talk, man.
Okay, yeah, so just elaborating on that, what Manager Williams is saying is correct. There is the benefit of emergency medical dispatch and the immediate mitigation through the protocols. So when we get somebody on that's having a medical emergency, we'd be able to basically use these individuals with them or themselves as responders and give them protocols over the phone. So that gives immediate action as soon as the call comes into the center. That's something that's not being done right now. So an example would be providing instructions on CPR, where a bystander would be able to give that information immediately. Another benefit would be the coordinated response between fire and EMS. Under option 4, we'd be able to dispatch units together and get the fire units there while the ambulance is responding as well. So it would be a more coordinated response. As far as the technology goes, what Manager Williams said is correct. There are hurdles that we would have to overcome as far as communications go. How do we outfit these units with the same radio equipment? They're on disparate radio systems right now. The second thing is our computer-aided dispatch system. Need that information. There are 2 different CAD systems in play right now. Whether we technologically link those systems together or we
take them and put them all on one system, and that would be some cost involved in accomplishing those goals.
Great. Thank you, Captain. We had, I'm sorry. We had Commissioner Neesmith, and then, well, we were going to have Commissioner Parker close out discussion of these proposals, but I mean, I'd be fine. You could share time with Commissioner Denson, but then let's move on to the next package. All right, go for it.
You're muted, Commissioner Neesmith.
I said. Thank you. Sorry. I support much of this package. I certainly support adding another mental health co-responder team. You knew that. I like the idea of the public defender salaries and operating expense increase. And social work in public defender's office is great. I think doing the study or in some way looking at the social worker idea for ACCPD deserves a lot of close looking at to see how we would do that, and I would hope that we can find a way to do that that's effective. I find both option 3 and option 4 to be full of a great many complications that problems that we don't know the solutions to. And note in that study that described option 4, it said it was a 2 to 3 year implementation to do this in option 4. I would like for us to set some money aside to do something, whether it's option 3 or 4 or 3A or 4B. But as I've said before, we haven't put the people at the table to work out the details of this. Adding these 8 911 trained 911 operators is a good idea. I think EMS is doing this now, but the delay in dispatching is a big problem. I hope that we can find a way to do it right. Neither one of these is the right way. One does not improve. Option 3 does not improve response times. It does give better outcomes. And option 4 sounds very problematic. It's going to change the way ambulances are dispatched across 2 counties. And I just want to sit down at the table and get everybody at the table together, which we have not been able to do, which is a real shame, and work out the details of this. We've got to solve this problem. There's no question about it. And if we want to use the 911 funds to solve the problem, that's great. That's the way to go. So all in all, I like this. There's just some details in option 4 and 3 that are very problematic for me. Thank you.
Okay, let's close it up with Commissioner Denson and Parker.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and Chief. If Captain Kelly's still on the line, I'd like to ask a question, and then this can also be. I'm happy to have the manager partially answer this too, but I want to be very clear. As I said, the idea would be $292,000 coming from the EMS 911 fund. That's why I've been talking. That's why we're talking about the budget. If that is the money that would pay to fix those radio situations that are being talked about here. To break it down, that would be $75,000 to phase in two new dispatchers, which are required for option 4. That would be $100,000 for 2 system interfaces, which is outlined in Manager Williams' email that he sent a few weeks ago. And then $117,000 for the 2 radios at $4,500 each for the 13 ambulances. That comes to $117,000. All of that equaling $292,000. That number, $292,000, that I'm asking that we include here to pull again from the E911 fund balance, is the cost for us to implement and fix all of those technical issues that we'd have to be able to bring the E911 dispatch in-house. And I'm just reading from, again, the report from ACCPD EMS Service Review and Recommendations from 2019. Again, it says the disadvantages with option 3 is that this workflow does not address the fragmented system created between ACC Central Communications and the National EMS Dispatch Center. Coordination of resources between ACC FES and National would still occur between the two communication centers, leading to that delay. If we go to option 4, it says the advantages with this is the workflow would allow ACCPD Central Communications personnel to seamlessly receive, process, and dispatch EMS calls. Person calls 911, they talk to one person, that person gives them all the information they need and plus potentially recommendations on how to deal with the situation and dispatches that ambulance immediately. No handing off to another person, which the person has to explain the situation, then it gets rid of the delay. We need to get rid of the delay. And again, we have the money sitting in a fund balance. $292,000 I'm recommending that we include from that fund balance includes the system interfaces, includes the radio, and includes the personnel for us to pull off option 4. The money's there. There is a plan already we've been sitting on for 3 years that was updated last year. The D. Burkett with the hospital said at the July 9th work session that we are ready to cooperate in any endeavor you want to initiate, and we'll make that happen. That was his answer when asked if they could support option 4. I don't understand why we're dragging our feet here when we have had situations where people and families have suffered from having delayed response from EMS. We know that's happening. We've all talked about it. We've all agreed it's a problem. And now we have a plan. And now we have the funding. I do not understand why we want to delay this. And I know we'll probably hit some bumps in the road. That's going to happen no matter how we do things. And I feel confident that we'll be able to deal with those bumps in the road and to be able to ensure that people are getting EMS dispatch to their homes, to their crisis situations in a faster way, helping our community be safer.
And if I could jump in, I fully support option 4. This is an idea that that we've heard for some time now. We got an email on May 31st reminding us of the time D. Burkett came before us. And I was reminded of a question I asked him, where I asked if it would help if all the 911 calls were routed through one center. And Mr. Burkett responded, quote, that's a great question. I didn't have to say that. He said, quote, we believe there would be a benefit. The question is how big the benefit would be for the cost, and that's a decision for the commission. We are ready to cooperate in any endeavor. That's exactly what Commissioner Denson said. The fact that we have these funds in the E911 fund ready to deploy, the fact that we've got an award-winning 911 command center, the fact that we've got a long-serving captain of that center who I believe is also highly decorated, the fact that we've got constituents who are experiencing delayed response times because while undergoing trauma, they have to explain what's going on twice before they can get an ambulance. I think it's time, and I pray that my colleagues, that we can come together on this. I think this is a great idea. It's an efficiency. We have one call that comes in, and we have one call that goes out. It also will create an opportunity for accountability. Our government staff will be managing the dispatching of the ambulances I'm not even certain we've gotten good information about ambulance dispatch from National EMS. It's very difficult to understand what information they provide. And the oversight committee is no longer meeting because our attorney believes it violates sunshine laws. So right now we're existing in a fog of ambulance dispatch that nobody really understands, but I know that I continue to get complaints from folks with the fear of death.
Yeah.
So let's do this, please.
Let me be clear. I am certainly willing to support the $294,000 going toward option 4. But I fear, first of all, we had not sat down with National EMS to review this. We have not sat down with the 2 hospitals who own the contract. So we are going to have some difficulties. We don't have time to work through those now, Tim. I understand that. And I will support this because we need to do something. And hopefully as we go down the road, and I know Chief Sproul might want to say something, so I'm going to be sure he's got time. As we go down the road, we can get everybody at the table and tackle these problems and come up with a good solution. It won't be a single dispatch center. It'll be 2. We will be handling our calls, but that I don't know whether we're dividing the ambulance into 2 counties and expecting those ambulances to stay here and not be in Oconee County when we need them, or we don't expect the Oconee County ambulances. By the way, there are no Oconee County ambulances. It's one pool of ambulances. Whether we expect all of their ambulances to have our radios, which means maybe it's a good idea, we would be dispatching all Clarke County calls, but it would not be in collaboration with their call center. So we may be dispatching to an ambulance that isn't available. These are just the issues I'm worried about. We can work on these, but I'm a technical guy. I like to see the solution before I spend money. I apologize for that.
Okay.
I think Chief has something.
Chief Sproul, did you have something you wanted to offer?
No, I was just going to concur that those are very real issues, and those are things that we would have to sit down with National to figure out how we would make that happen. If they had to commit an ambulance or multiple ambulances only to Athens-Clarke County, then there's going to be additional costs, because that means other ambulances that might have been able to service Oconee are now limited to Athens-Clarke County. So certainly we'd have to sit down and work that out.
Can I say something real quick?
Go ahead.
Tim. I like option number 5. Let's just do our own ambulance service.
Wow. Okay, so I think we're all wrapped up on those proposals. So let's shift gears.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, may I add one thing? So, I had further comments, but I'll save those because I know we spent a long time on this. I would like to hear from everyone on this proposal. I think that we sometimes hear from certain voices that are really loud, or we don't get a sense of where the commission stands to further figure out where we can go from here in terms of further educating our peers, building support, or changing direction. So would you mind if we heard from everyone really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's open it up for final input.
Folks that haven't spoken yet. Can I get something from everyone? Commissioner Wright?
Right?
We heard from Commissioner Wright. Let's see.
Mariah, please mute.
Okay, I will. I kind of was containing my remarks to option 4, but I will speak to the other ones. I do support the additional mental health co-responder team. I think it's vital that we have a 24-hour response. That certainly seems to be a great reform. I do support an equitable increase for public defender salaries, $45,000. We're halfway there by getting rid of our local supplement to the appointed DA. Social worker position for public defender office. I haven't read anything from that. I assume John Donnelly has maybe messaged us about that need for a social work position. Okay, I'll revisit the letter he sent to us. Study on potential for a 10-year tiered move of 50% of ACCPD force to a new unarmed social worker position, $50,000. Yeah, I'm open to that. I mean, if we save money by holding these positions open and maybe take a year off the life cycle, I'm fine with that. $50,000 to study our criminal justice response reform or our police response for police use of force reform. I'm all for that. And folded in that conversation, I would add my voice to something that has been pushed for some time now in this community, and that would be an independent review board of our police. I think it's a democratic process that could lead to the type of reviews and input from our community to put our police on the most solid footing with our community. We could look at things like use of force policies, et cetera. These are all reforms that are now being promoted widely. I just saw where Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor there, has signed an executive order creating a use of force review board for the Atlanta police. So I think these reforms are well taken, well heeded, and I look forward to pushing for those to be implemented. So that's where I'm at. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Well, we've spent a good bit of time on this one topic that just was emailed to me at 4:30 today. You guys clearly I had a 5 o'clock meeting, barely made it to this one. And I think Tim just emailed me a version of it that I can print out. And as you know, there's another group, a team of us have been working together to present some other ideas that overlap. They're not contradictory. So, and we also have a very important executive session tonight. So
yeah, I mean, we can move on if you don't have anything. That's fine. If nobody else has anything, let's move on.
Comment on everything will be here through next week. And we meet again on Thursday.
No, yeah, I was just opening the floor up one more time. Commissioner Parker was hoping to get some final input. That's okay.
I wanted to go round robin for everybody, and I think that we've got plenty to move with in the short amount of time we got it.
I just want to know where people stand so I can figure out how we can work together is all I'm asking for. Because if we don't talk to each other, we can't work together. That's it.
Okay. Let's move on. And Commissioner Parker, I encourage you or anybody else make phone calls offline, possibly. I don't know what I'm saying.
What is that echo?
Sorry. But can we move on? Are we good? Okay, let's move on. There's time, and we'll have time reserved at the end for final input as well, so folks can have another opportunity. So let's go. We've got the other position paper presented by Commissioners Hamby, Wright, Thornton, Davenport, and Harrod. So I'll just throw it to you five, whoever wants to take the lead, and go ahead and present.
I guess I will, Russell. Let me pull it up here so I can look at it. Can you hear me all right? I'm not echoing on you, am I?
Good. You good.
Okay. So I think what you see before you is a result of listening to what everyone has been saying, listening to what the members of the community have been saying, and trying to address some long-standing issues that we've had in this community, and see how we can move forward. And I think you'll see as we go through this that a lot of the stuff we heard from Commissioner Parker and Commissioner Denson can actually be woven into this or are part of this. Actually, certainly I heard Commissioner Link talking about what sounded like to me number one, which was reestablish a criminal justice task force. we put down here to examine equity and equality within our judicial and policing systems. I could also see that task force looking at policing systems as Commissioner Denson and Parker have been advocating for. I'll step back a minute and you know, y'all know how I'm kind of fond of acronyms and kind of putting something as together that in my mind kind of gives a little bit of focus. So we're calling this Start Athens, which is, you know, steps towards anti-racism together here in Athens. And so we want to emphasize that, you know, we're certainly welcome other ideas. Want to emphasize also that Mayor Gertz has already started laying the groundwork for a lot of these initiatives and current budget opportunities. And may correct me on this, but I think Mayor Gertz was on the original Criminal Justice Task Force, which out of that came our diversion center, among other things. So emphasizing that we're welcome other ideas, acknowledging that Mayor Gertz has laid the groundwork for a lot of this to occur. What we're doing here is just establishing it into the budget process and making sure it moves along during this year. And another point to take away from this, it's going to take all of us to work together to create this positive change that we're looking for, to create the positive change that our community needs and wants. And this is just a start. So anyway, going to number one, and I'm going to be brief because I know what I know and hear what we're saying is that we're going to have to take a lot of this and process it and come back at our next budget meeting and flesh out the details and flesh out where we agree on things. There's a lot I think we agree on if we look at this and some others as well. I will put a plug in. I do agree with the 911 stuff. So it's option 4. So, but that's not that's just Commissioner Hamby speaking, not the other 4 that's on here. So we'll have more discussions about that. So number 1 is reestablish Criminal Justice Task Force. I already mentioned about that. Number 2 is to create an Office of Community Mental Health Services for Athens. And I'm not sure how this would look. I think what I envision is that we do perhaps maybe do a contracting service with a consultant or several. I guess a consultant. By consultant, I mean experts in mental health, experts who do mental health, and there could be you could contract with several of them to do it, to provide mental health services for members of our community and try to address that. We've always talked and we've seen it nationwide how mental health over the years has just not been paid attention to, and we need in our community we can start doing that. And that also that mental health services, Office of Community Health Services could work with the police department as Commissioner Parker and Denson have been suggesting as well. So there's a lot that could go into that, is what I'm saying. Number 3, establish an Athens Equity Citizens Committee, and we established an inclusion office, and back in I forget what year, Mayor Gertz may remember, but it was probably 93 when the county and city merged. I think it's actually before then. 91 maybe. But anyway, when the city and county merged, they had all the ordinances from the city and the county and merged them all together. 30 years later, should we take a look at not how that was merged, but what was merged, and has it been looked at through an equity lens, and what are some policies or procedures or charter structure that we could look at through the equity lens, and perhaps having a citizens committee that works with our inclusion office to do that would be a good thing. Number 4 was touched on last night at the meeting by Mayor Gertz and Mayor Pro Tem Edwards and some others. And it's, we're talking about begin a new era to recognize and appreciate African American history and contributions, beginning with monuments prominently located downtown and relocation of existing monuments of the past. Maybe it is time to usher in a new era and start a new program and way to recognize. Let's move the old monuments to another place and put up some new monuments that recognize the contributions of African Americans in our community and others in our community. So I think that would be a good thing. Let me also point to what we've also done here is kind of laid out some budgets around each of these, but where the sources would come from. And what I'm suggesting here is this source could come from Athens Downtown Development Authority and a private. I'll say, the board of the Downtown Development Authority hasn't discussed this, but it's certainly something I would, and I'm sure Mayor Gertz would take to the board and Commissioner Edwards as well. Okay, moving along. Explore permanent places downtown, such as College Avenue, that will create opportunities for safe public expressions and celebrations. The time is right. I know Commissioner Link has talked about this for a long time now, and it seems like the time is right to look at College Avenue and see what could be done to allow that as a space for people to gather, for people to have events, for people to have celebrations, and to get to know one another. And I think, as we've all talked about, getting to know one another, having the conversations improves our community. Okay, and number 6 continues a conversation we've been having, but it kind of helps us define what we want to do with the Costa building, and let's move on and get it done. And renovate and dedicate use of Costa building as a small minority business center. The source of money for that could come from, of course, the current existing SPLOST dollars for that. Number 7, fund county minority purchasing officer for county procurement and minority services, product and consulting contracts. It's my understanding government ops is already looking into this. So let's see what we can do to put it in the budget, ready to go when a recommendation comes to us about that. Provide additional salary and training for law enforcement personnel skilled in community engagement and new policing strategies, and also provide for additional mental health responder team for ACCPD. Mayor's already got in his budget a new pay scale for the police department, but here we add $100,000 to fund that additional mental health team for Athens-Clarke County Police Department, which hits on the same thing that Commissioner Parker and Denson have talked about. Partner with organizations to create opportunities for conversations, engagement, and learning about racism and equity in our community. And again, this is, I know in the mayor's budget they have the inclusion dinners, and this was a little bit broader than that. This would work with the inclusion office, I would hope. And as you can see also down here, again, I'm not committing the ADDA to it, but we would have to have that discussion with the Downtown Development Authority about doing that. In the past, we have talked about the Downtown Development Authority having some sort of speaker series, and I actually had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Beverly Tatum at one time, who had a great discussion. It was an interview she was given at a conference I attended, and she wrote the book "Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?" Was also president of Spelman College, and just gave a really good talk. And as she was talking, I was thinking how that would be a good thing for us to have conversations like this in Athens, and having some money in here that's funded by the Downtown Development Authority could help get those conversations started. And I think that would be a good thing for the community. Number 10, establish an urban renewal impact committee to make recommendations for addressing negative impacts Athens urban renewal had on African American communities. Of course, this has been a conversation, but what we do here is we put in, with each of these committees, we put in some budget dollars to support the Citizens Committee work, because we know that's necessary. So, at any rate, that looking at that as well. Number 11 is build strong youth opportunities, beginning with middle-age school activities. Mayor Gertz mentioned this at our last meeting, as far as having opportunities for middle-aged kids is something that we need to put a little bit effort into. I think you were addressing middle-aged kids, middle school age kids. Mayor, if I'm wrong in that, let me know. But also,
yeah, when you get to middle age, you start feeling like a
I
school
know.
kid again. But yeah.
Well, I'm getting to old age, but we'll see. But and also summer youth employment programs, and this is something Commissioner Thornton brought to our attention and wanted in here, and it's something DeKalb County is doing. Michael Thurman, as chairman, Michael Thurman over in DeKalb has put together a program. And we all should need to learn more about it. But it's I put down here Virtual Career Academy, but it's my understanding is it's basically an extension of school or a summer school program, whereas kids are paid to go to school. And I think in Rockdale County they have 840 kids participating in this, and they pay them $9 an hour. So what we build in here is I think we put in enough money to fund 400 kids to do the same thing, and we'd need to, of course, learn how it's operating in DeKalb County and see if we can replicate it here. And I've heard that mentioned tonight. Let's look and see what other communities doing, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and let's build upon what is working for them and the good ideas there. Number 12 is stronger efforts to recruit upper and middle management minority ACC employees. Establish an opportunity fund for strategic minority recruitment and hiring of upper and mid-level management positions. And I know this is on management's mind, and I know there is an effort there, but what we're doing here is we're putting some dollars behind that effort to help make it stronger, to help make the recruitment stronger, and make sure that to make sure that our opportunities are there for minorities in our government, but also to make sure our government reflects our community. I think that's so important for us to do that. Okay, and number 13, address healthcare disparities for special populations. We've seen what COVID has done to the community at large, but it's and across this country, and it has specifically hit minority communities a lot worse. And we need to figure out if any lingering consequences are associated with that COVID issue, but also other minority issues. I've read, certainly I remember Dr. Claude coming from our health department and the minority community. Blood pressure is one of the number one diseases associated with minority communities. I just read recently too, prostate cancer among African American men is quite high in our community. So, doing what we can to help these healthcare disparities for minority communities is something I think we should look at, and we've got some stuff in here in our budget to be able to do that. Number 14 is prioritize SPLOST broadband project number 22, so that marginalized communities will have equal access to technology. You realize that when we've gone through this COVID and we're still having to meet on Zoom or whatever we're doing, the WebEx and other things, and having the technology to be able to go to these meetings, or having the technology for the kids who are having to learn from home and the teachers who are having to teach from home is such, as we move forward, the new normal may see more of that, and we need to be prepared for that. And we fortunately, our citizens passed SPLOST that included this project. So let's see what we need to do to get this project moving quicker, so that we can have the equal access to technology. Okay, so there's all that, and then there's the budget of what each of these are associated with, and you'll see there's as I mentioned, College Avenue, that can come from the Clayton Street Splice dollars. Manager Williams may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's already been a traffic study done about what would the impact be on College Avenue if it were pedestrian access only, and how much that may cost. I don't know if you've done the cost stuff, but certainly right now we're looking at Clayton Street, and it may be a good opportunity to get that done this year. Of course, the broadband is spliced, and so is Costa. But there are, hopefully there are partnerships. We've got some grant writers coming on board with this budget, not in this one, but the one the mayor's put forward. So hopefully that can help with a lot of this too. But I hope you see in this proposal the emphasis on mental health, the emphasis on partnerships, emphasis on community coming together and committees helping us find solutions to community problems. In the budget assumptions to help pay for this, we talked a little bit about the capital projects. In here, we are suggesting we've got 1.7 million allocated for fleet replacement. We also have a 2020 project that is fleet replacement. So what we're suggesting is prioritize those dollars up in more current years rather than the later years, and make sure that those savings from general fund to capital projects will be realized for some of these projects as well. I put down here $1.5 million to be able to do that, but certainly there is $1.7 million available. We don't use all the 1.5. There's a fund balance of $105,000 from that. So you can all see that on the proposal and digest that and have some comments on it next time we get together. One other thing that we do is, and I think this is important. Commissioner Neesmith made this point at the last meeting. When times were bad and the budget was bad, we did raise some millage rate. So when the tax digest is good, should we not be thinking about lowering the millage rate a little bit? And I've gotten several phone calls on it. I'm sure several of you have as well. And I think in this budget, if we have an opportunity to lower the millage rate, then maybe we should really think hard about that and look at doing it. And here we have, what we do is take the mayor's recommended millage rate of 0.125 and take it up to a 0.25 millage rate reduction. And you can see it there. Now this one may create some, the next one may create some discussion, but certainly we're open to the discussion about in order to help support the millage reduction and to support some of these other initiatives. We're looking at increasing on-street parking by 25 cents downtown, and I have also in here each fine by $5. I will say the two fines that we have downtown, if it's increased by $5, you'd expect a budget impact of an increase of about $80,000. So, certainly I can see just raising the on-street parking by a quarter makes a bit more sense. And I'll say it makes sense because of what we've seen with our parking downtown. More people are paying with credit cards, and the credit card fees are absorbed by our budget. And I guess we were talking about this just last night. Those credit card fees are absorbed by our budget. So raising on-street parking by 25 cents would help cover some of those costs of the credit card fees. And it would also raise, if you take out the fines, it's going to have an impact of about roughly $320,000. And then also, this is something for a future budget, but also to address the rising housing cost and rising affordable housing costs, is to by the time we get to our next budget, look at what a $10,000 county homestead exemption for FY22 would look like, and that way you are getting at the homeowners and helping with affordable housing costs associated with that. So I guess I just wanted to give an overview of that. I know it's a lot to digest, but I do want us to take away from this, discussions that we've had, what we heard this weekend with Commissioner Parker organizing the protest, and what we've heard also in our community for a while now. Let's start. Let's start Athens. Let's start taking the steps towards anti-racism together. Let's bake equity into our budget and do something about it. We're all tired of talking about it. Let's get it going and make it happen. And maybe this is just one way. This is just a start. I know there's other ideas out there, but let's start somewhere. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. That's all I got.
Thank you, sir. Any input questions? I see Commissioner Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and I remembered to unmute. So proud of myself. So, I like a lot of what you got here, particularly the things that are kind of built around economic justice, because there can be no racial justice without economic justice. So, talking about the small minority business development center is great. The minority procurement process is wonderful. It strikes me that a lot of these things are things that are already happening. I wanted to ask particularly about the Athens Equity Citizen Committee, since it sounds a lot like our Civil Rights Committee, and I wanted to clarify how that's different.
Do you want me to answer that? Well, I think that I can echo, but Equity Citizens Committee is taking a hard look at those ordinances, Commissioner Parker, and I think that and the charter structure, and I see it as a bit differently. I'm having trouble describe how differently just yet, but it does work with our inclusion office to take a look. I just have always been, and I think you mentioned this early on when you came on the commission. Let's look and see how our ordinances have been developed and look at them through an equity lens. And I think we can do that with this. And I think it's probably a lot of it separate. I hope that helped.
You cut out just a little bit at the very end, for me at least.
Oh, what I was saying is that, when we go to look and look at them through the lens, as I heard you talk about, I think this would be a lot of work for the committee. And
Mariah, can you check your microphone? I think it's causing Mike to echo.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike. You got to repeat yourself. It was a really bad echo. Sorry about that. Go again.
No worries. I was just saying, with an Equity Citizens Committee, having them as focused on looking at our code of ordinances, looking at our charter structure, and looking at it through the lens of equity, how they were developed, and what needs to be changed in there, and make recommendations would be a big task. And I think having, I understand the other Citizens Committee as well, but I see this as looking at what policies we could change, and what structure needs to be changed, if any, and taking a hard look at it that way, which would be a big job. That would not be a small task. So having a separate one, I think, would be good.
Okay. I also noticed that the Urban Renewal Impact Committee sounds a lot like what we have set up, or what the mayor's office is currently putting together around the Linnentown organizing. I know that there were some concerns at the time of those conversations about focusing on a specific community first, but that's what the residents wanted. And so I'd be really interested in, if possible, if we want to move forward with this plan, honoring the work that we have already done with that in some of the language here, to honor the process as well that's already unfolding in the government. If you want to fund it, that's great, but there's no need to reinvent the wheel with that, I think. I wanted to comment as well on number 8 about providing additional salary and training for law enforcement personnel skilled in community engagement and new policing strategies. I'm glad that you've embraced the addition of the mental health responder team for ACCPD. But I want to remind folks that recently in Atlanta, 2 cops were just fired for yanking HBCU students out of their car, punching them, breaking their arms, tasing them, who were trained in de-escalation and use of force training within the last 2 months before that incident. And so I am very dubious of the idea that more training is what's going to be necessary to help prevent violence in our community. Piling on additional training to officers who are already stretched very thin when we could instead bring in new people who are specifically experts in things like restorative justice mediation, who are trained as social workers, is what's really going to bring our community to greater peace regarding the future, a nonviolent and racially just future. Again, if you're open to addressing those things in this proposal, bringing in some of the ideas that Commissioner Denson and myself have outlined, and numerous community members have reached out to all of you in support of. I think that we could find some common ground there as well. But otherwise, I think you have a lot of good stuff here.
Yeah, and Commissioner Parker, I'm echoing again.
Please mute. Thanks.
Yeah, Commissioner Parker, and those are good points. And I will say this, certainly if you, in number 1, I see what y'all are asking for could be woven into that. And certainly that's what I think it's what I heard Commissioner Link talking about as well, as a reestablishment of the Criminal Justice Task Force to examine aspects that you're talking about as well, but also some other things within our criminal justice system and policing system. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Are you open to tailoring that language to reflect some of the things that I'm asking for?
I was hoping to jump in here for men.
I wasn't done yet. I was asking for a response from Commissioner Hamby.
I'm continuing discussion of it, Commissioner Parker, and seeing how it would look and what the expectations are. So sure, I'm always open to discussions and compromise.
Okay, Commissioner Link and then Commissioner Thornton. Muted. You're muted, Melissa.
Sorry. I also see that there's a lot of stuff on here that's already underway in different guises. I do have some questions about a couple things, like number 4, the recognize and appreciate African American history and contributions. I feel like that should be something that we partner with Historic Athens with. I mean, they're already doing a lot of this work. And also the Athens Cultural Affairs Commission, who, oversees public art and is doing a lot more outreach to the minority community and getting minority artists involved. And the downtown public space. I mean, that's definitely something I've been screaming and yelling about for a really long time. And I certainly agree that College Avenue is an obvious place to make that, but I also would like us to look at the street in front of City Hall as a proper green space town square. It has the benefit of being not having private businesses around it that might be disturbed by activities. So, I think we need to, again, revisit the downtown master plan and talk about needs of our changing community and the changing world and make some amendments to that plan long term. The Costa building, I think that could kind of fall under number 4 as well. We are talking about minority business and procurement and on the Government Operations Committee, so we're making some steps there. I do believe that the Costa building is an ideal place for a minority business center, which we've been talking about for quite a long time, especially being its proximity to Hot Corner and a historic African American business district. And that's the kind of thing that I think we could bring Historic Athens and the Cultural Affairs Commission into to make it not just a business center, but a cultural center, and installing some cultural resources and historic educational resources. Number 9, organizations to create opportunities for conversation and engagement about racism. I'm not sure the ADDA is the organization to partner with there. We have organizations in our community that are already doing this work. And so I believe if we're going to initiate these conversations, we need to bring them in on the front end. Number 11, with the youth opportunities, heck yeah, I'm all for that. You're talking about youth employment. I'm wondering if the community core that we're talking about with the resiliency package doesn't kind of cover that, or can be directed in that way. I've for a long time talked about a need for building on the Young Urban Farmers, Young Urban Builders style programs, and looking at our parks and trails with a Young Urban Rangers program where we get kids out in the community on bikes, with doing jobs that we need to have done, keeping an eye on these public spaces, but also getting some community engagement and some money in their pockets. Number 3, the Equity Committee. I believe the Overview Commission, currently we have this Overview Commission that's meeting, and it's supposedly pouring through the charter for some recommendations. And so I believe they might be doing that work. We might want to consult with the chair of that committee and see the direction that they're heading in. Last time, from the beginning, I heard that that's what they were looking at. Excuse me. College Avenue. I'm wondering whatever happened to the funding. Once upon a time, probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, there were plans for re-landscaping around the block around City Hall. And that got postponed and combined with College Avenue, or combined with Clayton Street. And then Clayton Street got put on hold again. I would like to ask the manager whatever happened to that funding, and if we could take a second look at that project, which I believe was designated in that funding set aside specifically for it. We could look at that for some downtown green space. I'm losing it, y'all.
All right.
Wait, I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
Not done yet.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. The on-street parking and fines. I am not in favor of increasing on-street parking costs and fines. I might consider supporting it if we can increase the length of the parking, or at least designate certain areas where we do allow for 4-hour parking. Our downtown business owners and workers are being slammed by parking and fines. They can't always get a space in the deck if they arrive for a shift during the day when those spaces are allocated. Or we need to come up with some kind of system that can cut these folks who actually work downtown a break. I would propose that we automatically go and designate all the parking on Doherty Street as extended parking. That still gives high turnover for those coveted spaces in the central downtown business district. But, I think we really need to take a new look at our downtown parking and make sure that there is room for those downtown workers who have been slammed by the fact that they have not been able to work these past 2.5 months. And I just had a quick question about policing and talking about training issues. And I'm wondering, do we have a psychologist on staff in our police department, or some kind of counselor? I know that being a police officer is probably one of the most stressful jobs out there.
Chief Sproul,
I know there's high instances of domestic violence among police forces. I'm just wondering, if that could help mitigate some of the issues we have with cops getting out of control once in a while.
Yes, if I can respond to that.
Yes.
So we have a what we call an employee assistance program that's run through the Human Resources Department, as well as we have a psychiatrist, Dr. Sampson, who, when and if an officer goes through a traumatic experience, they do what's called a critical incident stress debriefing and make sure that they get services. And so they have a variety of services where they can get help. And in fact, we even earlier today, given everything that's going on, an email came from HR reminding our employees that those services were available if someone needed them. And they're completely confidential, but those services are there.
Well, I know that, you can offer the services, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't always make them drink. I know there's a lot of pride for, especially with men, in asking for that help and following up on it. I'm wondering if there are programs we can initiate in the force that actually bring folks to those services on a regular basis, whether or not they've had a traumatic experience.
And the answer is yes. And I plan on bringing a person in to do that kind of training. I've done it in other departments where they will come in and do that kind of training for the officers to teach them the signs and symptoms, how to deal with the trauma and the difficult things that we face on a daily basis. And I will be working on bringing that in. I just haven't, it's a lot on the plate, so I haven't gotten to it yet, but I do plan on getting to it.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. That's really good to know. And I apologize for my dogs. I think the neighborhood raccoon's back.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Link. We've got, just let's be expeditious with our time because we are bumping up against this special session that we'd like to conclude expeditiously. So let's try to keep our remarks on this budget proposal. I've got Commissioners Thornton, then Wright, and then Denson.
I was just going to speak earlier, and I definitely did not mean to cut off Commissioner Parker in that space that I thought she was finished. But I really wanted to say that I think when we were hashing out ideas, we were presenting ideas that all of us could work together to come up with a budget, to come up with some items that we all felt that we are a part of or have contributed to it. The other reason this is interesting, yes, some of the stuff has been in the workings and some of it has kind of fell along the way. And I think that's a problem. We come up with a lot of great ideas, but we kind of don't follow it through. So some of these things are already being attempted. I think that we can tweak everything that guarantees what has already been started continues. That I think that was my intent. And lastly, around the I'm real clear that I think if we look at those communities that have been dismantled through urban renewal, that whatever we come up with, we do identify Lennon Town and replicate it or tweak it for other communities. So I like this proposal because it's more about hands-on things that already are going on. Some things are new, but everything we need, and we're not recreating the wheel, and we are not investing into another study. So that's for me. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Wright?
Yes, I know that this didn't get to everybody until around 12:30, 1 o'clock today, and I realize it's a lot to read for those that weren't on the team that was working on it. But again, it is a point. The way I was looking at it was trying to prioritize topics of our community for the budget for the next year. so that we had money allocated to it so it could be a priority and it could be prioritized within what we're doing now, and maybe it's shuffling or combining priorities of duties that are currently there. But Avita summarized a good bit of what I was going to say, but I realized that we all got different groups' information for us all to talk about. And Melissa, the details that you're talking about would be happening like as we go forward. This is getting, again, the money allocated for the priority of these topics for our community. And I really like the way that we've got some broad aspects of things. And I know that we all need time with this and each other's ideas. And so and we just keep the dialogue going, keep the questions, sharing information is, that's what it's all about. Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Denson, then Commissioner Neesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, and I guess I'll throw this first question to Commissioner Hamby. I mean, I'm a little confused with so the total budget's $12,098,000 for these proposals. Yet, I mean, this is a budget hearing, but only $1.24 million applies to this budget, and so I mean, if I'm being honest, it's a little confusing. I think definitely probably confusing to the public that the vast majority of this is either already funded through SPLOST or T-SPLOST, and or funded through an entity that's not Athens-Clarke County.
Did you have a question specifically?
I guess just what the purpose of that was.
Commissioner Hamby, you want to flesh out just why you decided to fold in these SPLOST projects into here?
I think it's the perfect time to do it. We are talking about budget. Certainly, SPLOST is a budget thing. Certainly finding money to do things that we've talked about over the years, whether it comes from the general fund or private partnerships or ADDA or SPLOST. I mean, there's still budget things. There's also budget impacts associated with, cost of building. There's budget impacts associated with broadband. So these are, when you're dealing with dollars and it's budget, it puts priority. See, because I look at the budget as the community, as what we want to prioritize, what we want to get done for the year, and having it baked into a budget document allows us to focus on that and get it done.
All right, cool. Mr. Denson, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, but those things are already paid for. I mean, the broadband, $10 million of this, broadband and the Clayton Street project, the cost of building. I mean, all of those things are not. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I love discussing these things, but I think it's definitely confusing to the public that they're going to somehow think that these things are being funded through the FY21 budget, and those things are already budgeted, and legally we have to do because of SPLOST referendum.
Well, I think, Tim, you see there, try to not make it confusing for you, because if you'll see down there, I list the sources of where it's coming from. So I'm very upfront about where the sources are coming from. If you see the general fund, I'm not really confusing about it.
Sorry, I just want to chime in that I've been asking ever since the pandemic hit for us to reprioritize or prioritize our SPLOST. And again, this is a priority list. And by us pulling the broadband up and finally doing the cost of building, it's a priority for this budget. And then I hope that after the budget is done, that we will move into other things to be prioritized, like the fleet management, and then we can learn the revenue coming in so we know the timeline. But again, these are prioritizing and dollar amounts. And if the document needs to be redone to number the topics to then be numbered with the budget, if that helps clarify it, we can do that and send it back out.
I mean, I think it's clear to me because I get the look. I mean, I don't think this. I guess this is not being shared with the public who's watching right now. And if I was the public, I would assume that the FY21 budget has $6.46 million going to broadband access, in which I just want to be really clear, like that money voters voted on last November as part of the SPLOST referendum. I just want to make sure that we're not confusing the public though.
Well, we're not, and maybe we can ask the manager where to put your all's idea and our idea, because the public doesn't have either one since they just got emailed out today.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, so we can find a place. So we'll get with technology and find a little place on the for the community, since it wasn't embedded in the agenda. And that can help everybody.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And maybe the documents can be cleared up to establish exactly what's coming from the FY21 budget. But and then my last point, just really quick, is I do agree. I like number 8, obviously for the corresponding team, and number 11 and number 13, especially number 13, because I do think that is something that we have not addressed anywhere else, and I think that would be good. Outside of those things, I definitely see just a lot of stuff that seems repetitive, like number 2, the community mental health services for Athens. I know that we already give in this budget $180,000 to Advantage Behavioral Health, which also receives massive state funding. And I understand that there needs to be support there, but I guess I want us to be spending money in that way efficiently and not funding 2 different overlapping programs that are attempting to do the same thing. Definitely same thing with number 3, which sounds like if we go back to the Office of Inclusion plan, incorporates that, as does number 12, which I'm a little unsure how that funding would be spent also. And then number 7, I know the County Minority Purchasing Officer. That is something that right now we have in Government Operations Committee. And I believe we just decided this past Monday that we sent a recommendation to the Mayor and Commission that we'll, I think, be voting on in July, making some recommendations, but specifically because of some legal difficulties holding off on that position. But again, I'll just reiterate, I definitely support number 8, number 11, and happy to definitely try to roll those things in with what Commissioner Parker and I proposed. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Denson. All right, we have, I'd like to let's keep our eye on the ball expeditiously. We got Commissioner Neesmith, then Commissioner Link, and then maybe we do a quick go around and then we go into special session because Chief Spruill has been with us all this time. Go for it, Commissioner Neesmith.
This is real quick. And Tim sort of jumped on this. Number 2, we have a community mental health service in Athens. It's called Advantage. It's a community service board. If we wanted to expand their capacity for some sort of special program, they already have the buildings, they already have the administrative staff, and by the way, they actually get fee for services, not so much state funding. So that would be a way, if we wanted to expand mental health services, we could do that collaboratively with Advantage and not have to pay for administrative staff or real estate.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Neesmith. All right, Commissioner Link, and then we'll all go around one last time. You're muted.
I'm good. I don't know. I'm fine.
Okay. All right, great. All right, well, let's go all the way around with some final thoughts. And I'll start and just say that, I'll be looking forward to reaching out to all of you and try to synthesize these ideas into something that we can all get along about. So look forward to hearing from me. As you always do, I'll be giving you phone calls. All right, let's keep going around. How about Commissioner Harrod? Any final thoughts?
I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting ideas. I think what Commissioner Hamby was talking about is really, yeah, some of these are new initiatives, some are ongoing, and it's really about putting everything in as part of a holistic, synergistic whole rather than having things in all sorts of different places. I think that the last proposal achieves a lot of the things that we've talked about wanting to do. It shows how they're going to be paid for. You know, we often have lots of ideas, but sometimes how to pay for them is sometimes a little bit lacking. And I think the other thing that's important, you know, is that it does provide some tax relief for our residents, many of whom are suffering from having lost their jobs or having had their hours cut back. So, you know, I think issues of mental health are really important. I really want to see those types of things funded. I think, you know, ideas about reimagining what policing might look like in the 21st century are interesting ideas. I'm looking forward to learning some more about those. So, yeah, so that's where I am.
Thanks. Commissioner Thornton. Can't hear you. Going once, going twice. Commissioner Hamby's passed. Let's go to Commissioner Davenport.
For me, I would just like to stick with the budget. Most of the Denson and Parker, we already have in the budget, and we're already talking about. It's just one component that we need to just hash out. Same thing with the Denson Herod, not the Denson, the Davenport Herod, and Wright and Thornton proposal. But that just, you know, just lays out where we want to go in FY21. You know, but at the end of the day, I just think we're taking an event that happened Sunday and some personal emotions and sidetracking the fact that, you know, as a unified government, we have a duty to make sure that we have a balanced budget, and that's what I really like to focus on.
All right, great. Commissioner Parker.
Oh, so now we're all going to be forced to speak. That's cool. I'm just kidding. I really want to urge
You don't
us.
have to. You don't have to.
I don't have to. Well, I mean, while we're doing it, I'm down.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to speaking more with you all about the research that I have done regarding effective means of offering the community a wider array of community crisis response, things that are working in other communities, and hopefully implementing within the Smart Athens plan the things that Commissioner Denson and I are talking about.
All right, great. Please mute Commissioner Parker. Commissioner Lee.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo what Commissioner Davenport had to say a little bit. You know, I want to make sure that we're being strategic and focused, not merely reactive to current events. And, you know, truly most of the stuff we're talking about in these new proposals are stuff that's either was proposed weeks ago. I mean, I had the conversation with lead public defender John Donnelly 6 weeks ago, probably when he requested the increase in salary and that social worker position. You know, and I forwarded it to everybody then. So that's something that's been under consideration for many, many weeks. You know, and you know, and we're constantly talking about increasing mental health services and the capacity of those co-responder teams. So I feel like it's only natural to continue that conversation and consider funding those. And I mean, yeah, I feel like just about every single one of these, you know, new budget proposals are things that have been discussed for a long time or are already underway in some form or another, or are just kind of a next step of something that's already underway. So, you know, I would like to see the Start Athens list with all the non-general fund stuff pulled out of it so we can just focus on the current budget impact stuff and then break that down and understand, you know, other sources for that funding as well, because I feel like a lot of these projects are not necessarily the purview of this government alone. There are some partnership opportunities or folding into stuff that's already happening. So if we could just pull the non-general fund stuff out of it, and as we move forward with these SPLOST projects and tweak them into, the final project, we always have in mind equity and, anti-racial, an anti-racial agenda and, a celebration of African-American culture that's been overlooked, not only overlooked, but completely ignored. So, I feel like that just should be in our view shed every single day.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner Link. Commissioner Wright passes on to Commissioner Dixon.
Thank you, Ian. I've really enjoyed this discussion, and I'll just reiterate that I like 8, 11, and 13 from this new plan, and I appreciate them bringing those things forward, and hope that we can just roll it into the other items that Commissioner Parker and I presented. And just to be really clear, the proposals 1, 2, 3, and 5 that Commissioner Parker and I presented, all 4 of those were discussed at our very first budget meeting of the session, well before the events that happened on Sunday. But I think the events on Sunday show that these things are needed when we were talking about these at, like I said, the very first budget. And then the study for us we try to move our police department to a new 21st century kind of idea of a social worker, non-lethal, non-armed positions. That was a discussion that we had at our FY21 goals and objectives meetings back in January. I don't think it's fair to say these things are being reactive. I think that unfortunately current events are just proving that these things are necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Neesmith. You're muted.
I think you guys have done some great work, and I really appreciate it. Mariah and Tim, I'm going to send you a link to some description of the sequential intercept model, which is a model for integrating mental health services through the entire spectrum of this criminal justice system, from at-risk youth all the way to post-incarceration, because mental health is not something that we just apply at the beginning of an event where the police are involved with a person. It has to be applied throughout the whole system in order to reduce recidivism and make people productive and cure them of mental illness and addiction. So I'll send that to you. I think that's probably an important element of what you're trying to do, but I don't think it's, I think it could be integrated. And I'm happy to work with you on that. Something I'm very interested in. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner Neesmith. That brings us to a close, and I would just like to take a moment to thank all of you for professionally participating in these discussions, focusing on policy and not on intentions. That's really where we all do our best work. So thank you. It's been a pleasure to chair this meeting. I will entertain a motion to adjourn and move into a special session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Take a quick break. Yes. 5 minutes, please.
Take 5. All right.
Please.
Let's do it.